Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity gets cozy and science takes the scenic route to slumber. Tonight, we're not gazing at the stars or drifting through theories of time. Instead, we're lowering ourselves slowly into a darker kind of mystery, one that waits beneath miles of restless water. For as long as humans have stared out at the ocean, we've wondered what immense shapes might be moving just out of sight. Sailors once swore they saw eyes the size of lanterns peering up from the waves, tentacles thick as tree trunks curling out of the fog, shadows that seemed too vast to belong to whales, too sinuous to be anything we knew. They called them sea serpents, leviathans, krakens. Some scoffed, some trembled, and some quietly noted the details because part of them suspected there was truth hidden in the exaggeration. And here we are, centuries later, still asking a question with no tidy answer. What ancient giants still lurk in the abyss? Where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps you're near the coast, where the sound of waves sometimes carries into your evenings, or maybe you're inland, far from salt air but still connected to the oceans that cradle this planet. Do you ever think about how much of Earth lies hidden below water? More than 70% of the surface, yet most of it remains unmapped, unexplored, and almost completely unknown. We've sent spacecraft to the edges of the solar system, but we've barely begun to chart the deep trenches on our own world. It means that right now, as you hear these words, there are creatures alive down there that we have never photographed, never described, perhaps never even imagined. That thought is both humbling and strangely soothing, isn't it? To realise that mystery is not just out in distant galaxies, but also right here, humming under our feet. If you find this quiet dive through science and story a gentle way to wind down, I'd be grateful if you liked the video, maybe even subscribed. It helps this little corner of calm reach others who might also need to rest while their minds wander into wonder. And if it keeps you awake a bit longer, at least you'll have drifted through a sea of knowledge before you close your eyes. So, let's settle in. The room around you is steady. The world outside continues its rhythms, and together we'll descend into the cold blackness where ancient forms still move. When you imagine the deep ocean, what's the first picture that appears? For some, it's the shimmering blue just below the surface, where schools of fish flash silver in the sunlight, and dolphins arc like playful punctuation marks. But keep going downward, past the reach of sunlight through layers where the blue fades into a dusky indigo, and then into complete darkness. Down there, pressure builds to levels almost unimaginable. Temperatures hover near freezing, and yet in these conditions life has not only survived but thrived for hundreds of millions of years. The giants we're talking about tonight are not just large in size, they're immense in time. They are living echoes of ancient seas, bodies adapted to crushing depths, slow rhythms, and endless dark. It's tempting to think of them as relics, like dusty fossils somehow walking again. But the truth is more subtle. These creatures never disappeared. They simply carried on hidden from our sight. A Greenland shark, for example, gliding slowly through Arctic waters, might live for 4 or 5 centuries. Imagine that. A living animal born before the American Revolution could still be out there right now, eyes clouded with age, skin roughened by centuries but very much alive. That single shark's lifespan quietly erases the boundary between ancient and modern. And then there are the squids. Not the small ones that dart in shallow bays, but the truly colossal forms with tentacles stretching longer than buses, beaks strong enough to slice through bone, and eyes as big as dinner plates. For generations, these giants were considered sailors' tall tales, exaggerations born of fear and fatigue. But every so often, a tentacle washed ashore, scarred with suction cups the size of coins. Later, entire carcasses surfaced, pulled up accidentally in nets or stranded after storms. Science had to admit what sailors already suspected. The kraken was real, though we now call it the giant squid, and even larger cousins, the colossal squids, roam Antarctic waters. It's worth pausing here, because even with our modern ships and submarines, We've rarely seen these squids alive in their natural depths. Think about that. One of the largest invertebrates on Earth, capable of battling sperm whales, spends its entire existence in a realm we've only glimpsed with brief, grainy footage. If such massive animals can still keep their secrets from us, what else might be hidden in the blackness? That question is not superstition. It's science reminding us of how limited our reach really is. You might be wondering, why do these creatures grow so large in the first place? The answer isn't simple. Scientists talk about deep-sea gigantism, a tendency for some species in the abyss to evolve much larger bodies than their shallow water relatives. Giant isopods, for instance, are like enormous pill bugs that can reach the size of a football. They scuttle along the seabed, armoured in thick shells, looking like something that crawled out of prehistory. Some theories suggest that the cold temperatures slow metabolism, allowing energy to stretch further, while the high pressure encourages larger body structures. Others think it's an evolutionary arms race. In the dark, being big helps you capture scarce food and avoid being swallowed yourself. But gigantism is not just a curiosity, it's a clue. It tells us that the abyss is not barren, not empty, but a place where life has shaped itself in ways that challenge our assumptions. When you see a photograph of a giant squid's eye or a king crab's enormous spindly legs, you're not just looking at weirdness. You're looking at survival strategies honed over eons, proof that even in crushing darkness, nature finds a way to push boundaries. And of course, humans have always filled the gaps of knowledge with imagination. The myths of sea serpents and leviathans didn't appear out of nowhere. Imagine being a sailor hundreds of years ago, on a wooden ship creaking in the night, when something vast brushes against the hull. You lean over with a lantern and see an eye staring back, bigger than your own head. Wouldn't you describe that as a monster? Wouldn't you tell the story when you made it back to shore, and wouldn't that story grow just a little larger each time? Some of those tales were exaggerations, yes, but some may have been genuine encounters with real giants that science is only now beginning to understand. It's also worth remembering how little of the ocean we've explored. Estimates suggest that more than 80% of the seafloor remains uncharted. Entire mountain ranges, trenches deeper than Everest is tall, and ecosystems bursting with unknown species lie beyond our reach. Every time a deep-sea submersible descends, it brings back footage of animals that defy expectations. Transparent predators with glowing jaws, jellyfish with arms trailing like chandeliers, fish that look more like dragons than anything else. And if such bizarre new forms are still being discovered regularly, why not giants we've only whispered about? Think of the coelacanth, a fish believed to have gone extinct 65 million years ago. Textbooks confidently declared it gone. Then in 1938, a fisherman in South Africa hauled up a strange catch, and scientists had to rewrite their certainty. The coelacanth hadn't vanished. It had simply been living quietly in deep waters, unchanged since the age of dinosaurs. Its lobe-finned body and ancient anatomy were living proof that extinct sometimes just means hiding. If one forgotten fish can return like a ghost from the fossil record, who's to say larger creatures couldn't still be out there, slipping between the beams of our submersibles? The ocean, after all, doesn't care about our sense of completion. It holds its secrets until it decides otherwise. And that thought should remind us not to confuse ignorance with absence. We didn't know giant squid were real until we finally saw them. We didn't know coelacanths were alive until one swam into our nets. Perhaps the abyss is still waiting to reveal its next revelation. As you're listening, maybe you can picture that descent. Imagine a submersible slipping below the waves, lights cutting narrow beams through the dark. At first, the water is full of drifting snow, tiny particles of organic matter sinking slowly from the surface. It's called marine snow, and it's the main food source for much of the deep. Deeper still, the snow thins, and the silence grows heavier. Then suddenly, in the spotlight, a shadow. At first, it seems like a trick of the light, but then it moves, deliberate and immense, a body built for pressure and patience. Is it a squid? A shark? something we don't even have a name for? That's the moment explorers live for, and it's the same moment that haunts our imagination long after. It's easy to think of giants only in terms of size, but they are also giants in endurance. The Greenland shark, barely moving, taking centuries to live out its lifespan. The bowhead whale, another Arctic resident, possibly living more than 200 years, carrying harpoons in its flesh from whalers long gone. These animals embody time itself in ways we struggle to comprehend. They remind us that to the ocean, centuries are just the rhythm of tides, and all of this, everything from squid beaks to fossil fish, hints at something even larger. The abyss is not just a place on a map, it's a living archive. It's where ancient body plans, ancient strategies, and ancient lineages continue, unaffected by the noise of the surface world. Down there, the past and present swim side by side. Down there, giants from different ages coexist quietly, reminding us that evolution is not a ladder but a branching tree, with some branches growing slowly, almost imperceptibly, but never breaking. So as we begin this journey into the hidden world of ancient giants, keep in mind that what we're really asking isn't just what creatures are out there, but also what do they tell us about survival, about resilience, about time itself. The abyss is less a graveyard of lost species and more a cathedral of persistence. And in the stillness, in the weight of the dark, there are shapes still moving that carry with them stories older than our species, older than our civilizations, older even than the continents as we know them, and this is only the beginning. When we think of night, most of us picture the sky, the stars, the quiet streets where lamps cast soft circles of light. But night is not just something that happens above us. It has another form that waits below, where sunlight disappears completely and the world is plunged into an eternal version of darkness. This is the ocean at night, not just on the surface but in its true depth, a place where the sun has no reach and where darkness isn't a temporary condition but the permanent state of being. Imagine being suspended there, surrounded on all sides by black water, the horizon gone, the ceiling gone, even the ground beneath you invisible. It's not an emptiness though, it's a fullness, packed with life that has adapted to a world without light, a realm where ancient giants drift and hunt unseen. For us, darkness usually carries a sense of limitation. We close our eyes, we switch off the lights, we sleep. But in the deep ocean, darkness is not rest. It's the environment itself. Creatures here are not asleep, they are thriving. To them, light would be a disruption, an oddity, maybe even a danger. And that's one of the most striking realizations when you consider the ocean at night. What feels to us like an inhospitable void is actually home to more biomass than all the forests combined. The majority of life on this planet lives not where we can see it, but in the dark water we cannot. It's worth pausing to picture how the ocean transitions as the sun fades. Near the surface, the water glows with blues and greens, fish darting like sparks in a campfire. As you descend 100 meters, the brightness dims, colours fade to greys, and red vanishes first. By the time you pass 200 meters, it's twilight. Scientists call it the mesopelagic zone, or sometimes the twilight zone, not because of eerie television shows, but because the last strands of sunlight filter weakly through. It's enough light for shadows, but not enough for photosynthesis. Plants can't survive here, so animals feed on particles drifting down from above or on each other. Past 1,000 meters, even that dimness disappears. The sun might as well not exist. You have entered the midnight zone, and from here downward, all is night. Now, consider this. 90% of the ocean is in permanent night. That means most of Earth's living space is in darkness all the time. Our sense of what's normal comes from the surface, where we can see, but for most of the biosphere, the baseline condition is blackness. And in that blackness, giants still move. The first explorers who lowered lights into this world were shocked not by emptiness but by abundance. Instead of a desert, they found swarms of fish, shrimp, squid, and jellyfish. Many of them produced their own light. Bioluminescence is almost universal here. Tiny organisms flash to startle predators. Larger creatures glow to attract prey. Some dangle luminous lures from their heads like living fishing rods. Others send out faint pulses like Morse code, signalling to potential mates in the dark. To us it's a wonder, to them it's language. Imagine entire ecosystems communicating in flashes and glimmers, the abyss alive with silent conversation carried out in light. But bioluminescence also hints at size. A small spark might come from plankton, but sometimes the glow reveals much larger outlines. A jellyfish stretching meters long with delicate strands like glowing silk threads. A squid with spots that flicker on and off across its skin like a living billboard. Even some sharks glow faintly, their bellies shimmering with light that hides their silhouettes from predators below. It's as if the creatures of the deep have taken night and turned it into their own kind of day, one built not from sunlight but from ancient chemistry, and this night has been here for as long as oceans have existed. Long before humans built fires or cities, long before trees spread their leaves, the seas were already deep and dark. The animals that live in this eternal night have lineages stretching back hundreds of millions of years. Some of them have barely changed at all. When we look at them, we're not just seeing unusual shapes, we're seeing persistence across epochs. It makes sense, then, that many of the beings we think of as living fossils come from the depths. The night protects them. It shields them from the rapid shifts of climate and predators that reshaped shallow waters. Hidden in the abyss, they survived extinctions that wiped out countless other species. They simply went on, slowly, steadily, unseen. There's something both eerie and comforting about that idea. To know that somewhere in the black water, there are sharks older than trees still cruising slowly, their bodies cold and steady, their eyes blank but aware. To imagine squids large enough to wrap their arms around submarines gliding silently, where no sunlight will ever fall. These aren't myths, they're living truths of the ocean's night. But how do you picture this darkness? The human mind resists imagining pure blackness. Even when you close your eyes, there are flashes, patterns, hints of colour. The deep sea is beyond that. It's an absence of light so complete that even when your eyes adjust, they find nothing. And yet, ironically, the ocean at night is filled with flashes of light created by its inhabitants. A paradox of sorts. It is the darkest place on Earth, and also the most bioluminescent. If you were there, inside a submersible with its lights switched off, you'd see sudden bursts as organisms reacted to your presence. Trails of glowing blue spirals would drift past like comets. Tiny points would pulse around you like stars. In that moment, you'd feel like you were floating not in water, but in a kind of inverted sky, where galaxies are alive and moving. Now think about what this means for the giants. A whale rising through the midnight zone, its immense body cutting a silent path. A giant squid pulsing with faint light from chromatophores in its skin. These creatures are not just large, they are theatrical. Their very presence alters the stage. They carry the night around them, sometimes breaking it, sometimes blending perfectly into it. To the smaller animals, these giants are worlds in themselves, moving shadows that might be a threat, a refuge, or both. And in this constant night, time feels different. For us, day and night divide life into patterns. We work, we rest, we rise, we sleep. In the abyss, there is no dawn. There is no dusk, only cycles of migration and hunger, of drifting snow and sudden predation. Some animals travel upward at night to feed closer to the surface, then retreat back into the dark by day. This daily movement, called diel vertical migration, involves billions of creatures, the largest migration on Earth, happening every single night. Imagine rivers of fish, shrimp and squid rising through kilometres of water, feeding under the cover of darkness. then sinking back before the sun can catch them. It's a kind of heartbeat of the planet, invisible to us, yet shaping everything from carbon cycles to climate. If you ever wonder whether giants could still remain undiscovered, remember that this nightly migration involves so many organisms that they once confused naval sonar, creating false readings of a deep scattering layer. Military equipment interpreted it as the seafloor itself, only to find that the floor seemed to rise and fall each day. It wasn't the bottom at all. It was life, a mass of moving animals, thick enough to reflect sonar as if it were solid. That should tell you something about scale. The ocean's night is not empty. It is teeming, layered, and immense enough to trick our instruments. And when something is that full of life, it's inevitable that giants are part of it. Some, like the colossal squid, we know. Others, we suspect. There are reports of shadowy shapes seen by submersibles, too large to be familiar species. There are sonar contacts that don't match any known animals, echoes of something vast moving deliberately through the dark. Science demands caution, of course. Many such reports turn out to be schools of fish, reflections, or simple errors. But some remain unexplained. And in the most unexplored part of our planet, unexplained doesn't mean impossible. Picture yourself again, floating in the midnight zone. Around you, silence. Then a sound, low, deep, rolling through the water. A whale song carrying across miles. To us, it might seem lonely. To them, it is connection. The ocean's night is filled with sound in ways we barely grasp. Whales communicate across entire basins, their voices shaped by the depths. Squids and fish make clicks and pops. Even shrimp can snap so loudly in groups that they create a crackling like distant fire. For the giants, this soundscape is a kind of vision. Where our eyes fail, their ears and vibrations guide them. Night for them is not blind. It is rich with information, richer perhaps than our daylight world. All of this brings us to an important realization. When we ask about ancient giants in the abyss, we are not just asking whether big animals exist down there. We're asking about how life functions in a world where our normal rules don't apply. Darkness, for us, is limiting. For them, it's home. Gigantism, for us, is strange. For them, it's useful. Bioluminescence, for us, is rare. For them, it's universal. The ocean at night is not an exception to Earth's ecosystems. It is the majority. And within that majority, ancient creatures have persisted quietly. Their size both a defense and a story written in flesh. So the next time you stand on a beach at night and look out over the dark waves, try to imagine what that night looks like below. Beneath the moonlit ripples, beneath the surface fish, beneath the fading blue, there is an entire realm of perpetual night. And in that realm, giants glide, unseen but present. Their bodies carrying histories older than ours, their lives moving at a scale we're only beginning to notice. And as we sink deeper into this journey, we'll see that the legends humans once told about monsters rising from the dark were not entirely wrong. They were simply glimpses, filtered through fear and imagination, of a world that really does exist. A world where night never ends and where giants still linger. For as long as humans have lived near the water, we've told stories about what waits beneath it. Some of those stories were warnings, some were entertainment, and some were desperate attempts to explain what we had no other way of understanding. When you look at maps from centuries ago, especially the ones drawn in the age of exploration, you'll often find the margins decorated with fantastic creatures. Dragons curling in the waves, serpents with mouths big enough to swallow ships, tentacled monsters dragging sailors into the depths. The phrase, "here be dragons," wasn't just a flourish. It was a reflection of real uncertainty, a recognition that the ocean was vast, unmapped, and very possibly full of things beyond imagination. Those legends never fully went away. Even now, when satellites trace the shapes of coastlines and submarines descend into trenches, whispers of sea monsters still ripple through our cultures. And the question is why? Why do these legends refuse to die? One reason is simple. The ocean doesn't give up its secrets easily. Imagine being a sailor in the 15th century. Weeks from shore, your only guide the stars and the wind. Your ship creaks constantly, the woods swelling and groaning under strain. Nights are long and the sea is restless. Then, one evening, something massive brushes against the hull. You rush to the side and see a coil thicker than any rope you've ever handled sliding back into the waves. Maybe it's just a whale, but whales don't usually twist like serpents. You tell the others, and by the time the story makes it back to shore, the coil has become an entire serpent, hundreds of feet long, with eyes glowing like lanterns. That's how stories grow. They feed on the fear and awe that the sea inspires, and in the absence of photographs or scientific names, imagination fills the gaps. But imagination isn't all there is. Many of these tales have roots in real encounters with real creatures. Take the kraken, for instance. Sailors in the North Atlantic described an enormous beast that could wrap its arms around ships and drag them under. For centuries, naturalists debated whether it was real, and many dismissed it as folklore. Then, in the 19th century, carcasses of giant squid began washing ashore. Beaks as large as fists, tentacles marked with suction cups the size of coins, eyes bigger than a man's head. The kraken wasn't a myth after all. It was an exaggeration of a very real giant living in the deep. Today we know giant squid can grow longer than 15 meters, and colossal squid can be even bigger. When you think about what a sudden encounter with one of those would be like for someone unprepared, it's no wonder the story became legendary. The same goes for sea serpents. Reports of long, undulating creatures stretching across the waves have come in for centuries, from Norway to New England. Some of those sightings can be explained as oarfish, which are rarely seen but can grow over 8 meters long and move in ways that do look serpentine. They live in deep water, but when they do appear near the surface, especially if they're sick or dying, they look every bit the sea serpent of myth. Others may have been whales moving in lines, their backs breaking the surface in a way that, from a distance, resembles a single long body. But still, not all reports have neat explanations. Even in modern times, with ships equipped with cameras and radar, sightings of unidentifiable creatures still crop up, fueling the same old question. Are we seeing exaggerations of known giants, or glimpses of something else entirely? Legends don't just survive because they're mysterious. They survive because they connect with something deep in us. The ocean is vast and we are small. Standing on the deck of a ship or on the shore looking out at endless water is humbling. The idea that something larger than life might inhabit that water feels natural. It gives shape to our awe and sometimes to our fear. Every culture that lived by the sea invented its own giants. The Norse spoke of Jörmungandr, the world serpent so large it encircled the earth. In the Hebrew Bible, there is Leviathan, a sea monster of chaos. Polynesian myths describe Tangaroa, a powerful ocean deity whose offspring include enormous creatures. Japanese folklore tells of Umibozu, a shadowy figure that could capsize ships. Though the details differ, the themes are similar. The ocean is powerful, unpredictable, and filled with beings that reflect its immensity. What's interesting is how many of these myths overlap with the animals we now know exist. When whalers first began describing sperm whales scarred with circular marks, it was evidence of battles with giant squid. That detail slipped into legends and gave them weight. When sailors spotted oarfish, the sight of a glittering silver serpent writhing in the waves confirmed old stories. Even misidentified whales became leviathans in the retelling. In other words, legends often begin as eyewitness accounts, distorted through fear, distance, or lack of context. The giants are real, even if the details shift. But let's not dismiss the creativity of myth either. Sometimes the stories were symbolic, ways of giving form to the dangers of the sea. A kraken might represent the whirlpools that could swallow ships. A serpent might embody storms that seem to rise out of nowhere. Leviathan could symbolize the chaos that always lurk just beyond the horizon. These creatures became characters in humanity's relationship with the ocean. They were reminders that the sea wasn't just a place of fish and salt water. It was a realm of power that demanded respect. And because they worked so well as symbols, they endured even after science offered other explanations. Think too about the role of mystery in keeping legends alive. The ocean is the perfect stage for monsters. Unlike forests or mountains, it hides almost everything from view. A shadow passes below your boat, a shape breaches in the distance, only to vanish again. You hear a low groan in the night that echoes through the hull. The ocean gives you just enough to stir your imagination, but not enough to be sure. And once a story begins in that environment, it's hard to put to rest. Every unexplained ripple can be tied back to it. Every strange carcass washed ashore adds fuel. And every new generation of sailors or beachgoers carries the legend forward, often adding their own flourishes. Even now, with sonar and satellites, the ocean still leaves plenty of room for mystery. Submersibles sometimes record shapes too large to identify. Fishermen occasionally pull up creatures never seen before. Entire species are discovered that nobody even suspected. When that happens, it's impossible not to think back to the old stories. Maybe not every serpent was a misidentified whale. Maybe not every kraken was just a squid. Maybe some of those legends were snapshots of animals that still wait in the abyss, encountered only briefly and forgotten until the next sighting. And that possibility, however small, is enough to keep the legends alive. People still report sea serpents. Newspapers still occasionally run stories about mysterious carcasses found on beaches. Scientists still debate whether the ocean could harbour animals larger than anything we've yet documented. The fact that we've explored so little of the deep only strengthens the case. After all, if we've only mapped a fraction of it, who can confidently say what does or doesn't live there? It's worth noting too that legends often outlast their original contexts. Sailors no longer rely on celestial navigation or wooden hulls, but the stories they told still resonate. They're part of the cultural fabric. Children grow up hearing about sea monsters. Writers use them in novels and movies. Cryptozoologists chase them as if they're evidence waiting to be confirmed. And ordinary people, standing on a pier at night, still sometimes wonder whether the ripple they see in the distance is just a wave or something far more extraordinary. The persistence of these legends also tells us something about ourselves. We don't actually want every mystery solved. Part of us craves the unknown, the thrill of possibility. If every inch of the ocean were mapped and catalogued, some of the magic would vanish. The idea that there could still be leviathans out there, creatures so large and ancient that they blur the line between myth and biology, keeps the ocean alive in our imaginations. It ensures that every dark wave still carries a little wonder. And remember, legends are not always exaggerations. They can be early forms of data collection, passed through oral tradition instead of journals. Polynesian navigators described patterns in the stars, waves and winds long before Western science acknowledged their accuracy. It's possible that some monster tales are similar, accounts of rare encounters, stripped of precision but carrying a kernel of truth. If a community describes a massive creature seen in the same waters over generations, perhaps it's worth paying attention, not because every detail is literal, but because the pattern suggests something is there. So when we talk about ancient giants lurking in the abyss, we aren't just talking about the animals we can measure. We're also talking about the ones we've imagined, the ones that haunted sailors and poets, the ones that turned uncertainty into story. These legends refuse to die because they speak to something timeless, our awareness that the ocean is too big for us to fully know. As long as that's true, there will always be room for krakens and leviathans, sea serpents and shadowy shapes. Maybe they're metaphors, maybe they're misidentifications, maybe they're something real waiting to be rediscovered. But whatever they are, they endure, weaving myth and reality together in the endless night of the sea. And when you think about it, That endurance itself is a kind of giant, a creature not of flesh and bone, but of imagination and memory, growing larger each time it's told, refusing extinction even when evidence is scarce. It swims alongside the whales and squid in our minds, just as vividly alive, reminding us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved quickly. They're meant to linger, to inspire, and to pull us back, again and again, to the question of what still moves unseen beneath the waves. When we think about fossils, most of us imagine stones in museum cases, bones pressed into rock, or shells etched into cliffs. They're the preserved remains of things that once were, silent traces of life that disappeared millions of years ago. But not every fossil is frozen. Some are still swimming, crawling, drifting, and hunting in the present. These are the living fossils, creatures that seem to have stepped out of prehistory and into our modern oceans with barely a change. They are reminders that evolution doesn't always mean constant reinvention. Sometimes a design is so effective, so resilient, that it endures across vast stretches of time. Picture the coelacanth, for instance. For decades, textbooks declared it extinct, wiped out along with the dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period. It was a fish known only from fossils more than 60 million years old, a relic of an ancient ocean that no longer existed. Then, in 1938, a fisherman in South Africa pulled up a strange catch from his net. It had fleshy, lobed fins, a thick, scaly body, and eyes that seemed far older than anything familiar. When scientists examined it, they realised they were staring at a creature thought long gone. The coelacanth had never vanished at all. It had simply retreated into deeper waters, living quietly out of sight, carrying on its ancient lineage while we assumed it was a ghost. That discovery shook the scientific world. It was like finding a living dinosaur grazing in a field or a pterodactyl perched on a cliff. The coelacanth didn't just prove itself real. It proved that the ocean still had the power to hide survivors from ages we only knew through stone. And that raised an irresistible question. If this fish had endured unnoticed, what else might still be lurking in the depths, waiting to remind us that extinction isn't always final? The coelacanth isn't alone in this category. Horseshoe crabs, for example, have scuttled along shallow coasts for more than 450 million years, long before trees grew on land, long before dinosaurs took their first steps. Their bodies, shaped like armoured helmets with long spiked tails, look alien to us, but they were common long before humanity existed. What's remarkable is that they've hardly changed. The fossilised horseshoe crabs of hundreds of millions of years ago look nearly identical to the ones alive today. And they're not obscure little curiosities. Their blood, with its copper-based chemistry, has been vital to modern medicine, used to test the safety of vaccines and medical equipment. So here we are, in the 21st century, relying on a creature that looks like it belongs in the Cambrian. That's what living fossils really are. Ancient designs still shaping modern life. And in the deep sea, the list grows longer. Take the frilled shark, with its eel-like body, rows of needle teeth, and gills that form a ruffled collar. Fossils suggest that sharks like this swam the oceans 80 million years ago, and the living version today looks almost the same. It's not a sleek predator like a great white. Instead, it drifts in the dark, lunging at prey with sudden bursts of speed, its jaws snapping shut like a trap. Imagine encountering one unexpectedly. You'd be looking at a living piece of the Cretaceous, alive in our time. Then there are the nautiluses, those coiled-shelled relatives of squids and octopuses. Their lineage goes back 500 million years. They were already thriving when trilobites crawled across the seafloor. While most of their relatives vanished, the nautiluses kept on, floating in the deep with their chambered shells, using jet propulsion and simple eyes to survive in ways that didn't need improvement. To hold a nautilus shell is to hold a pattern perfected before mammals even existed, still functioning today with little change. And jellyfish, strange pulsing umbrellas of the sea, may be even older. Some lineages trace back more than 500 million years. Soft-bodied creatures rarely leave fossils, yet there are impressions in stone that look almost exactly like modern jellyfish. They've outlived ice ages, meteor impacts, and entire dynasties of animals. They do it not with armour or intelligence, but with simplicity. A body made mostly of water, nerves arranged in a diffuse net, muscles that pulse and tentacles that sting. When survival is that efficient, there's no need for reinvention. What ties all these creatures together is not just their age, but their persistence in environments that favour endurance over change. The deep sea, in particular, is a sanctuary for ancient lineages. Unlike shallow seas or land, where ecosystems shift rapidly with climate and geology, the abyss is stable, it's cold, dark and pressurised, but it doesn't change much over time. Once a creature adapts to that environment, it can remain there indefinitely, generation after generation, out of sight of most predators, out of reach of human disruption. That's why so many living fossils are found in deep water. The abyss is a time capsule, preserving designs that worked long before we appeared. Think about that for a moment. The coelacanth swimming in a deep trench today is not just an animal, it's a witness. Its ancestors swam alongside plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. They lived through the rise and fall of continents. They endured when entire ecosystems vanished. Each beat of its fins is a continuation of a rhythm older than humanity, older even than mammals, and that endurance gives weight to the idea of ancient giants. If a fish we thought extinct for 60 million years can reappear, why not something larger? Why not a giant that found its niche in the abyss and never needed to change, never needed to come to the surface to be noticed? It's not only fish and invertebrates. Some sharks, like the Greenland shark, embody this endurance too. They can live for centuries, their bodies growing slowly in the cold. A Greenland shark alive today might have been born in the reign of Shakespeare or even earlier. Its flesh contains toxins that act like natural preservatives, slowing its metabolism to a crawl. To us, that pace seems alien. To them, it's survival. Imagine a creature that considers centuries a normal lifespan. That's not just a fish, that's living history. Living fossils also remind us how fragile our perspective is. We measure life in human terms, decades and generations. We imagine evolution as a constant march of change. But for the ocean, millions of years can pass with little need for alteration. Stability is its own kind of success. These creatures survived not because they kept changing, but because they didn't need to. Their very lack of change is proof of their perfection in their niche. And in the depths, where sunlight never intrudes and conditions remain constant, those niches endure. It also means that every time we descend into the abyss, we're not just exploring new territory. We're stepping into an ancient museum where the exhibits are alive. A frilled shark drifting past the submersible is not just an odd predator, it's an echo of an ocean that existed before humans, before apes, before even most dinosaurs. A nautilus slowly rising in the beam of a light is not just a shell, it's a relic of a lineage that watched the continents form. And a coelacanth cruising in the gloom is not just a fish, it's proof that our picture of extinction is sometimes incomplete. And if such creatures can endure for so long, what about the larger ones? What about the shapes sailors saw and described, the giants hinted at in myths? It's not hard to imagine that some of those might also be living fossils, bodies that found the deep sea to be a refuge and never left. After all, the Nautilus doesn't care that the world changed. The coelacanth ignored 60 million years of upheaval. Perhaps somewhere out there, a lineage of giant predators has been doing the same, slipping through epochs as quietly as a shadow. Living fossils don't just tell us about the past, they tell us about survival strategies that work across scales of time we can barely imagine. They show that life is not always about progress or complexity. Sometimes it's about simplicity, about finding a design that fits and holding on to it stubbornly. And in the abyss, where pressure, darkness and cold rule, those strategies are rewarded. So when we talk about ancient giants lurking in the deep, remember that we're not just talking about possibility, we're talking about precedent. We already know that life can endure unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. We already know that entire lineages can vanish from our sight and then return unexpectedly. We already know that the abyss shelter survivors we thought were gone. In that light, the idea of giants still waiting down there isn't far-fetched. It's consistent with everything the ocean has already shown us. And if you listen closely to those stories, the fishermen pulling up coelacanths, the divers glimpsing nautiluses, the scientists studying frilled sharks, you realise that the line between fossil and living thing is thinner than we think. These animals are fossils not because they're dead, but because they embody endurance. They are bridges between epochs, proof that time in the ocean flows differently, and as we move deeper into this journey, they remind us to keep our minds open. Because if the past is still alive in so many forms, the present may be far stranger than we've yet dared to believe. When most people think of squids, they picture small, darting animals, maybe the ones that end up on dinner plates as calamari. Quick, slippery, not exactly threatening. But in the depths of the ocean, the squid family has members that make those shallow water cousins look like toys. Among them is one of the most impressive, elusive and mysterious animals alive today, the colossal squid. If the giant squid once carried the crown of myth, the colossal squid has stolen it quietly, hiding in the dark waters of the Southern Ocean, showing itself only rarely, and hinting that the ocean's biggest stories are still unfolding. The giant squid was for centuries the stuff of legends. Sailors spoke of krakens dragging ships beneath the waves, arms coiling like monstrous ropes. Skeptics dismissed these tales as fear born from exhaustion or storms, but then carcasses started washing ashore, enormous, soft, and unmistakable. Scientists began to realise that the stories, exaggerated though they were, had roots in truth. But even as the giant squid began to take shape in our understanding, another species lingered in its shadow, stranger and in some ways even more formidable. That's the colossal squid. Unlike its giant cousin, it's not just long, it's thick, heavily built, with hooks on its tentacles instead of simple suction cups, and eyes as large as dinner plates, the largest eyes of any creature known. It was only in the early 2000s that scientists managed to capture one relatively intact, hauled up accidentally by a fishing vessel in Antarctic waters. When they laid it out on the deck, they were stunned. Its body was broader, its arms heavier, its entire form more robust than the giant squids. While giant squids may reach greater lengths, the colossal squid is bulkier, heavier, a true heavyweight of the invertebrate world. And yet, despite its size, it remains a ghost. Almost no one has ever seen one alive in its natural habitat. Think about that. In the 21st century, with submersibles, cameras and satellites, one of the largest animals on Earth still moves mostly unseen. Its life cycle, hunting patterns and behaviour almost entirely a mystery. Part of the intrigue of the colossal squid comes from its adaptations. Those hooks on its tentacles set it apart. While giant squids have suction cups lined with small teeth, the colossal squid has swivelling hooks, sharp and capable of gripping prey with terrifying force. Imagine being a fish in the Southern Ocean, drifting through the dark, only to feel arms lined with hooks seize you and drag you into a beak strong enough to shear bone. That's the reality of living alongside these giants. They're not passive drifters, they are hunters, and given their size, they don't go after small fry. They take on fish as large as the Patagonian toothfish, a predator in its own right, and they've even been found in the stomachs of sperm whales, suggesting battles between titans take place regularly in the dark. The scars on sperm whales tell the story too. Circular marks, sometimes running in long lines across their heads, are evidence of suction cups or hooks scraping as the whales wrestle with squids in the deep. Picture that encounter. A whale, the largest toothed predator on the planet, diving to a mile below the surface in pursuit of food, meeting a colossal squid. The whale has size and power, but the squid has arms that can stretch and coil, a beak ready to slice, and eyes that can detect even the faintest glimmers of movement in the dark. We don't get to watch these battles, but the marks left behind on whale flesh are proof that they happen. It's the kind of story that would make any sailor believe in sea monsters, and it's not just the colossal squid. The squid family as a whole contains creatures that stretch the imagination. The giant squid, Architeuthis, is famous now, thanks to rare footage finally captured in recent years, showing its long, slender form gliding silently through the dark. For centuries, it was only known from carcasses and from those circular scars on whales. Now, seeing it alive, we realise it isn't the thrashing monster of myths. It's graceful, almost elegant, its long arms flowing like ribbons, its body pulsing gently as it moves. That grace doesn't make it any less formidable, of course. With arms stretching longer than a bus, it is one of the largest invertebrates ever to exist. Then there are their smaller but equally strange kin. The Humboldt squid, sometimes called the red devil, may not reach colossal sizes, but in groups they become terrifying. They can grow over 2 meters long, and they hunt cooperatively, flashing colours across their skin to communicate. Divers who have encountered them report being surrounded by dozens at once, their tentacles tugging, their sharp beaks snapping dangerously close. They are fast, aggressive, and intelligent. Reminders that squid are not just passive drifters, but cunning predators with complex behaviours. Even stranger are the vampire squids, named not for blood, but for their dark, cloak-like webbing between their arms. They live in oxygen-poor zones where few others can survive, their metabolism slow, their lives long by squid standards. Though small compared to their colossal relatives, they embody the same principle. Squids find ways to thrive where most animals cannot. And if that's true for small species, it's no stretch to imagine how the largest of them can dominate the abyss. What fascinates scientists about squids, especially the colossal and giant species, is not just their size, but their rarity. How can animals this large remain so elusive? The answer lies in their habitat. They live in waters too deep for sunlight, in regions too remote for frequent exploration. Submersibles rarely go where they live, and fishing vessels only encounter them by accident. Most of what we know about them comes from pieces. A tentacle washed ashore, a beak found in a whale's stomach, a blurry photograph of a carcass. Imagine trying to piece together the life of elephants if you'd only ever seen tusks and bones washed up on a riverbank. That's the challenge scientists face with squids, and yet, even with these fragments, a picture emerges. These creatures are not rare mistakes of evolution. They are thriving lineages, perfectly adapted to their niche. The colossal squid's bulk, its hooks, its enormous eyes. These are not curiosities. They are tools for survival in the most unforgiving environment on Earth. Its size allows it to dominate prey. Its eyes allow it to detect the faintest light from bioluminescent flashes, giving it an advantage in the dark. Its hooks allow it to hold on to struggling fish in crushing currents. And its very mystery protects it, keeping it hidden from us, far beyond the reach of casual observation. It's worth remembering too that cephalopods as a group are ancient. Squids, octopuses and cuttlefish have ancestors stretching back more than 500 million years. Long before fish with jaws evolved, cephalopods were already swimming the oceans, experimenting with shells, tentacles and jet propulsion. The ammonites and belemnites of prehistory with their coiled shells and spiral forms were close relatives of modern squids. They were among the dominant predators of their time, and some grew to enormous sizes. To see a colossal squid today is to glimpse that ancient dominance still alive, a lineage that never relinquished its place in the food chain. Think about how rare it is to find an animal that combines mystery, size and endurance like this. Whales are massive, but we know them well. Sharks are ancient, but we study them often. Squids somehow manage to be all three at once, ancient, gigantic and hidden. They inhabit a world we can barely access, and that makes them living legends. It also means that our picture of them is incomplete. For all we know, there may be squids larger than any we've yet documented, living at depths beyond our reach, their bodies never seen by human eyes. It's not speculation without evidence. It's a recognition that every new discovery about squids has expanded their size range, not shrunk it. Each time we thought we knew their limits, we found bigger specimens, and given how little of their habitat we've explored, the possibility of giants even beyond the colossal squid remains open. And if such giants exist, imagine the ecosystems they shape. A colossal squid is not just one animal, it's a keystone in its environment. Its prey includes large fish. Its predator is the sperm whale. Its presence influences the behaviour of others. When a creature this large hunts or is hunted, it affects the balance of the deep. And if there are even larger undiscovered squids, their influence would be even greater. They could be part of battles, migrations and food webs we have yet to imagine, shaping the abyss in ways we only glimpse through scars on whale flesh or occasional catches in fishing nets. For centuries, the squid has been both a source of fascination and fear, a symbol of the ocean's unknowable depths. Writers from Jules Verne to modern filmmakers have seized on their image, turning them into metaphors for mystery itself. But what's striking is that reality is just as fascinating as fiction. The colossal squid doesn't need exaggeration. Its hooks, its eyes, its sheer bulk, these are dramatic enough, and the fact that it still eludes us makes it even more compelling. It's not a relic of imagination. It's a living creature, prowling waters we still barely touch. When you picture it, try to resist the temptation to see it only as a monster. Imagine instead the silence of Antarctic waters, the cold pressing in from all sides, the faint glow of bioluminescence trailing in the dark. Out of that blackness, a massive shape moves, arms slowly coiling, fins pulsing gently. It's not raging or thrashing. It's simply existing, perfectly at home in a world we consider hostile. That calm presence, that quiet dominance is what makes it so awe-inspiring. A giant that needs no spectacle, only its own survival. And as you let that image settle, remember that it's not alone. The colossal squid has kin, giants, hunters, drifters, and survivors spread across the cephalopod family tree. Each of them carries a piece of ancient history, each of them adapted to niches humans can barely imagine. Together they remind us that the ocean's largest secrets are not always locked in fossils or myths. Sometimes they're alive, swimming just out of reach, waiting for the rare moment when the currents, the nets, or the cameras bring them briefly into view. When we talk about age in nature, it's easy to think of mountains or rivers, things that take millions of years to carve or erode. But living creatures can carry that kind of age too, not just in their individual lifespans, but in their entire lineages, and few lineages remind us of this more than sharks. Sharks have been around for over 400 million years. To put that in perspective, they were swimming in the oceans long before trees appeared on land. That's not a metaphor, it's literal. There were sharks before there were forests, and they're still here, circling in the same waters that now lap against our coasts, surviving extinction events that erased most other lineages, enduring with bodies so perfectly suited to the ocean that they barely needed to change. Picture the first forests, primitive plants clawing their way upward, stretching into new forms, creating habitats where none had existed before. Above them, the sky was filled with strange insects just beginning to experiment with wings. Dinosaurs were still far in the future, yet in the oceans sharks already swam. Their skeletons were made not of bone, but of cartilage, lighter and more flexible, giving them speed and agility. Their teeth grew in endless rows, replaced continuously as they were lost, ensuring they never went dull. These innovations worked so well that they remain in sharks today, hundreds of millions of years later. Sharks are older than trees, older than flowers, older than mammals. They are one of nature's longest-running experiments in survival. Among them are species that embody this ancient resilience more dramatically than others. Take the frilled shark. With its eel-like body and mouth lined with rows of needle-sharp teeth, it looks more like something from a fossil than a modern predator. Its 6 pairs of frilled gills give it a strange, ruffled appearance, and its hunting style, lunging forward and swallowing prey whole, recalls a time when the ocean was filled with different competitors. Fossil records show similar sharks swimming tens of millions of years ago, and yet here they are, still alive, drifting through the depths like ghosts from another age. To see one in person is to realise that evolution doesn't erase everything. Some designs endure, carrying history forward in flesh and blood. And then there's the Greenland shark, perhaps the ultimate example of time embodied in an individual. These sharks live in the icy waters of the North Atlantic and Arctic, moving so slowly that at first glance they look sluggish, almost lifeless. But their pace is their strategy. Their metabolism is so slow that they grow just a few centimetres each year, reaching sizes of up to 7 metres over centuries. Radiocarbon dating of their eye lenses suggests that some Greenland sharks alive today are over 400 years old, making them the longest living vertebrates known. Imagine that. A shark born when Shakespeare was still writing plays could still be alive today, drifting under Arctic ice, unaware of the world above but carrying its own quiet continuity. Their longevity is possible partly because of their environment. Cold waters slow their metabolism. Their flesh contains compounds that act as natural antifreeze and even mild toxins, discouraging predators and parasites. They rarely rush, rarely expose themselves to danger, and in that patience lies their endurance. The Greenland shark doesn't just represent an ancient lineage, it represents the idea that life can stretch across centuries, that time itself flows differently in the deep. Other ancient sharks add to the picture. The goblin shark, with its long flattened snout and protruding jaws, looks alien, a design that seems experimental by modern standards, but has actually endured for over 100 million years. Its jaw can snap forward with startling speed, grabbing prey with teeth that resemble nails. The frilled shark, the Greenland shark, the goblin shark, each of them is a reminder that sharks don't just belong to one age, they belong to all ages. They are survivors, bridging eras, carrying genetic blueprints that were written before forests shaded the land. And of course, no discussion of ancient sharks can avoid the megalodon. Though extinct now, it was the ultimate giant in the shark lineage, growing to lengths of over 15 metres, with teeth the size of human hands. Megalodon dominated the seas just a few million years ago, preying on whales and ruling as an apex predator. Its disappearance remains debated. Changes in climate, shifts in prey availability, competition with other species like orcas and great whites. But its shadow lingers in our imagination. Some still wonder whether, in the depths we have yet to explore, remnants of such giants could survive. Science offers little support for that possibility, but the thought persists, fed by the knowledge that so many other lineages have endured unseen. What makes sharks particularly fascinating is how their survival is tied to their design. Their bodies are streamlined, built for efficiency. Their senses are extraordinary. They can detect electric fields from prey, smell blood at incredible distances, and sense vibrations in the water with uncanny precision. These adaptations aren't new. They were present in early forms and remain in modern ones, fine-tuned but fundamentally unchanged. Sharks are proof that sometimes evolution isn't about constant reinvention, but about refinement. Once the essentials are in place, survival depends on persistence, not transformation. And persistence is what sharks do best. They've lived through 5 mass extinctions. They swam when continents were still drifting into the shapes we recognise today. They adapted to shifts in temperature, chemistry and competition. While countless other lineages rose and fell, sharks simply continued. That's why, when you see a shark today, you're not just looking at a predator. You're looking at a lineage older than most landscapes, older than most life we see daily. You're looking at an animal that measures time in scales we struggle to grasp. In the context of the abyss, this endurance becomes even more meaningful. Many of the most ancient shark lineages live in deep water, far from human eyes. The frilled shark, the goblin shark, the Greenland shark. These aren't species you're likely to see near shore. They inhabit the twilight zones, the midnight depths, the icy polar waters. That's where they've found refuge, where they can live slowly and quietly, hidden from the disturbances of the surface world. It's no coincidence. The deep ocean is stable. It changes little over time. For creatures that rely on endurance, it is the perfect environment. And it's also the perfect hiding place for giants we might not yet know. When you think about sharks older than trees, it's not just about numbers, it's about perspective. Trees seem eternal to us. They outlive generations. They stand as symbols of endurance. Yet sharks predate them. Before the first forests cast shadows across the land, sharks were already swimming, already hunting, already refining the same traits they still use today. That means every shark alive today carries not just its own lifespan, but an ancestry that stretches back into times we can barely imagine. When a Greenland shark glides through the dark, it is not just a fish. It is a vessel of history, a body carrying the imprint of ages. And this makes sharks central to the question of ancient giants. If a lineage can endure hundreds of millions of years, if individuals can live for centuries, if bodies can remain effective across extinctions and upheavals, then the possibility of undiscovered giants becomes less fanciful. The ocean has already proven that it can preserve such forms. Sharks show us that survival over unimaginable timescales is possible. All we need to do is accept that the abyss may hold more than we've yet seen. So the next time you hear the word shark, don't just think of the sleek hunters in tropical shallows or the villains of movies. Think of time. Think of forests rising after they were already swimming. Think of their teeth, countless millions of them, falling to the seafloor over ages, forming fossil beds that stretch for kilometres. Think of their quiet persistence in the deep, their bodies unchanged while continents broke apart above them. Sharks are not just predators. They are historians of evolution, alive and moving, reminders that the ocean keeps its oldest secrets well. When you think of ancient creatures, your mind might drift toward armoured beasts, massive jaws, or towering skeletons in a museum. But sometimes, the most enduring forms of life are the ones that look the most delicate. Jellyfish are almost paradoxical in that sense. They are soft, almost ghostly, made mostly of water, yet they have outlived the dinosaurs, the mammoths, and countless other lineages that seemed far sturdier. They are some of the oldest surviving animals on Earth, with origins stretching back at least 500 million years, maybe even longer. That means jellyfish were drifting through the seas before trees, before flowers, before birds took flight. They've been here not just through one age of giants, but through them all, pulsing gently as the world above them changed again and again. It's difficult to wrap your mind around just how long jellyfish have been around. Imagine Earth 500 million years ago. The continents were arranged differently. The seas were warmer, and life was still in its early stages of diversification. Trilobites crawled along the seafloor. Strange armoured fish without jaws patrolled the shallows. Plants had yet to cover the land. And yet, if you dipped your hand into the water, you might have brushed against the soft, translucent bell of a jellyfish. In shape and function, it would not have looked much different from the ones you can see today. Evolution has sculpted them, refined them, and diversified them, but the core design, a bell-shaped body that pulses to move, trailing tentacles lined with stinging cells, has endured almost unchanged. Part of their secret is simplicity. Jellyfish don't have brains in the way we think of them. They don't have bones or blood or complex organs. Instead, they have a nerve net, a diffuse network of cells that allows them to sense light, motion, and orientation. Their bodies are mostly water, supported by a thin layer of muscle. They pulse rhythmically, drifting with currents more than swimming against them. To us, that simplicity seems fragile, but it's exactly what has allowed them to endure. Without specialized organs to fail, without skeletons to restrict them, they are adaptable, flexible, and efficient. In environments where other animals struggle, jellyfish drift on. And drift is exactly what they do. Some species travel vast distances with ocean currents, their lives dictated not by territory, but by the slow rhythms of the sea. Others remain in particular regions, blooming in great numbers when conditions are right. Their life cycle itself is unusual, alternating between a polyp stage, where they attach to surfaces and bud off clones, and the familiar medusa stage, the free-floating form we recognize as a jellyfish. This cycle allows them to persist through harsh conditions. When food is scarce or temperatures drop, the polyps can remain dormant, waiting years before producing new medusae. It's as if jellyfish have built resilience not just into their bodies, but into their very way of reproducing. Some species go even further. The so-called immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dorni, has a remarkable trick. When stressed, injured or starved, it can revert its cells back to an earlier stage, transforming from a medusa back into a polyp. In effect, it can start its life over, potentially avoiding death altogether. While in practice they still die from predation or disease, the principle remains staggering, a creature that can rewind its own aging process, a cycle that could, at least in theory, go on indefinitely. For an animal without a brain, jellyfish have mastered a kind of cellular resilience that science is still struggling to understand. And yet, despite their fragility, jellyfish can grow to astonishing sizes. The lion's mane jellyfish, for example, is one of the largest. Its bell can span over 2 meters across, and its tentacles can trail more than 30 meters behind it, longer than a blue whale. Imagine being in the water with one, its translucent mass barely visible, its tentacles drifting like ghostly curtains through the dark. It's both beautiful and intimidating, a reminder that jellyfish may look insubstantial, but can command immense presence. Encounters like that may have inspired tales of sea monsters, glowing orbs with tendrils that ensnared the unwary. Other deep-sea jellyfish are stranger still. Some look like glowing chandeliers, with arms that pulse with bioluminescence. Others resemble flying saucers, with delicate fringes that flash in patterns. Some can fold their bells inside out, capturing prey in a way that seems more alien than earthly. Every time submersibles descend into the deep, new species are documented, each more bizarre than the last. And many of these discoveries remind us how little we know about the abundance of jellyfish in the deep. For all we can say about them, their diversity still surprises us. Jellyfish are also survivors of mass extinctions. When the asteroid struck 66 million years ago and wiped out the dinosaurs, many marine ecosystems collapsed. Yet jellyfish continued. Their ability to drift with currents, to reproduce prolifically, and to subsist on plankton allowed them to thrive even when food chains were disrupted. They have no skeletons to weigh them down, no dependence on specific prey that might vanish. They eat what they can catch, often tiny animals, sometimes even other jellyfish. In times of chaos, flexibility is an advantage. That's why jellyfish, in their soft, almost formless way, outlasted the dinosaurs and so many others, and they are still thriving today. In fact, in some regions, jellyfish populations are booming, sometimes overwhelming ecosystems, clogging fishing nets, and even shutting down power plants by swarming water intakes. Climate change, overfishing, and warming seas may be tipping the balance in their favour. It's ironic. In a time when many animals are struggling to survive, jellyfish, Creatures without bones, brains, or eyes in the traditional sense are multiplying. The ancient drifters may yet dominate the future. But what does all this mean for our journey into ancient giants? It shows us that fragility can be deceiving. We often imagine giants as armoured, muscular, and imposing. Jellyfish remind us that being soft, simple, and passive can be just as effective. They've outlived almost every other major lineage. They've adapted not by changing dramatically, but by enduring in forms that require little energy, little complexity, and little dependence on fragile ecosystems. In a way, jellyfish are the ultimate survivors. They prove that you don't need strength to outlast ages. You only need to fit the environment, and the environment of the ocean has always welcomed them. Think again about their presence in the abyss. Deep-sea jellyfish, glowing faintly, drifting through waters where almost nothing else moves. They might be massive, trailing arms that sweep across meters of darkness. They might be delicate, flashing in pulses. They are living fossils in the truest sense, carrying designs that first appeared before most modern animals existed. And when you see one, whether in a photograph or on the screen of a submersible, you're looking at something both ancient and immediate. That juxtaposition is part of their allure. They don't just remind us of the past, they bring it into the present, alive and drifting just beneath the surface of our awareness. There's something meditative about jellyfish too. Watch one pulse, slow and steady, its movements almost hypnotic, and you can imagine that rhythm continuing for millions of years. It's not a rush, not a fight, not a race. It's persistence, the quiet continuation of a form that works. Maybe that's part of why they captivate us. They're reminders that survival doesn't always mean conquest or speed. Sometimes it means drifting patiently through the currents, taking what comes and enduring. And in that endurance they've seen everything. They were there before the first dinosaurs took their steps. They were there when the first mammals scurried beneath ferns. They were there when humans first looked out over the sea and wondered what might be beneath it. They've been present through it all, pulsing gently, glowing faintly, trailing arms like threads of history itself. So when we ask what ancient giants still lurk in the abyss, jellyfish deserve a place in the answer. Not because they are predators of myth or colossal hunters of whales, but because they are proof that age does not always mean extinction. Some giants survive not by fighting, but by drifting, not by conquering, but by enduring. And the jellyfish, soft and glowing, are among the greatest survivors of all. For much of the 20th century, the coelacanth was more legend than reality, a fossilised outline in textbooks, a name whispered with the certainty that it belonged only to the deep past. Paleontologists had traced its history in stone, found in rock layers more than 60 million years old, and they were confident the story had ended there. The coelacanth, they said, had gone extinct with the dinosaurs, vanishing in the same wave of destruction that reset the planet. It was a fascinating creature, yes, with its lobed fins and strange anatomy. But it was gone, consigned to the museum shelves and lecture halls. And then, one day in 1938, a fisherman off the coast of South Africa pulled up a catch that rewrote everything. Among his nets, wriggling among the fish, was a creature that seemed out of place. Its scales were thick and rough, almost armoured. Its fins were not the flat, ray-like structures of most fish, but fleshy, lobed, jointed in a way that looked eerily like primitive legs. Its eyes were pale and glassy, its body strange and massive. When it was brought ashore and examined by scientists, the realization struck with force. This was no ordinary fish. It was a coelacanth, alive and very much real, a creature thought lost for over 60 million years suddenly present in the modern world. That moment shook biology like few discoveries ever have. It was the equivalent of finding a living dinosaur or a mammoth wandering across the tundra. A species long presumed extinct was not extinct at all. It had been alive the entire time, swimming in deep waters unnoticed, escaping detection simply because no one had looked in the right places. The newspapers called it a living fossil, a phrase that stuck. Scientists called it a Lazarus taxon, a lineage that reappeared after being presumed gone. But whatever the terminology, the meaning was clear. Extinction was not always the end. Sometimes, the ocean simply keeps its secrets. The coelacanth is not just any fish. It is part of a lineage that bridges a critical moment in evolutionary history, the transition from water to land. Its lobed fins are not like the fins of tuna or trout. They are thick, muscular, supported by bones arranged in patterns that resemble the early stages of limbs. It was from relatives of the coelacanth and other lobe-finned fish that the first tetrapods emerged, crawling onto land and beginning the great story of amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually us. To look at a coelacanth is to look back at the anatomy that hinted at our own beginnings. The discovery in 1938 was only the start. For years, that one specimen was thought to be an anomaly, a fluke. But then more were found, particularly around the Comoros Islands in the Indian Ocean. Later, another distinct species was discovered near Indonesia, separated by thousands of kilometres from the African population. Suddenly, the coelacanth was not just a curiosity. It was a surviving lineage with living populations in multiple regions. It had endured quietly deep below the surface, hiding from our eyes but not from the ocean itself. What's astonishing is how little this coelacanth has changed. Fossils from the Devonian period, more than 350 million years old, look strikingly similar to the living specimens. The same lobed fins, the same heavy scales, the same overall shape. Evolution has not erased or reinvented it. Instead, the coelacanth's body has persisted, efficient enough to survive without major alteration. It's a time traveller in scales and fins, a reminder that sometimes the best design is the one that lasts. And yet, despite its ancient form, the coelacanth is not a primitive leftover. It has its own adaptations, suited to the deep waters where it lives. Its body is filled with oil, helping it maintain buoyancy. Its metabolism is slow, allowing it to survive in environments with limited food. Its movements are unusual, almost like walking. When scientists filmed coelacanths swimming, they noticed that their lobed fins moved in alternating patterns, similar to how tetrapods walk on land. Watching one glide through the water feels uncannily like watching the ghost of evolution itself, a fish hinting at legs, moving with rhythms that would later shape mammals and humans. The return of the coelacanth raises questions far larger than itself. If a creature thought extinct for 60 million years could turn up alive, what else might still be waiting? The deep ocean is vast, much of it unexplored. It is entirely possible that other lineages we believe extinct have found refuge there, surviving unnoticed. Each rediscovery, like the coelacanth, reminds us to be cautious in declaring an end. Extinction may be real, but our knowledge of it is incomplete. Some lineages may not be gone, only hidden. That's part of why the coelacanth matters so much in the context of ancient giants. It proves that survival in secrecy is possible, that the ocean can conceal species for longer than humanity has existed as a species. If a large fish, one that can grow to nearly 2 meters in length, could remain hidden until the 20th century, why couldn't something even larger still remain undiscovered in the depths? Every time we say, "No, that's impossible," the coelacanth's shadow falls over our certainty. It is proof that the improbable sometimes swims right beneath us. There's also something humbling about its endurance. The coelacanth lived through the asteroid impact that ended the reign of dinosaurs. It survived the ice ages, the rearrangement of continents, the rise of mammals, and the spread of humanity. While empires rose and fell on land, it continued in silence below the waves, unbothered, unchanged. To stand face to face with a coelacanth is to stand in the presence of an ancient witness, a creature that carries within its very body the record of epochs we can only reconstruct in fossils and imagination. And it's not just a survivor. Its rediscovery sparked renewed interest in the deep sea. If this one lineage could reappear, what else might the abyss still hold? researchers began to look more carefully at remote regions, more willing to entertain the idea that unknown giants might be possible. The coelacanth became a symbol of humility in science, a reminder that the ocean's depths are still writing their own chapters, whether we read them or not. It's easy to romanticize the coelacanth, to see it as a relic or a curiosity, but the truth is it's a living, breathing animal facing the challenges of survival like any other. Its populations are small, vulnerable to fishing and habitat changes. Its endurance across geological ages doesn't guarantee its future in the human age. That irony is hard to ignore. A species that survived the asteroid impact, ice ages, and continental drift could still be undone by nets or pollution. It reminds us that endurance is not invincibility. Even the oldest designs can falter when the environment shifts too quickly. But that fragility only deepens the wonder of its existence. The coelacanth is not invincible, but it is improbable. Every time a submersible captures footage of one in its rocky habitat, its fins moving in that strange leg-like gait, we're seeing the persistence of a form that has no right to still exist by our assumptions, and yet does. It's a living contradiction, both fragile and enduring, ancient and present, a fossil that breathes. And perhaps most importantly, it is proof that our view of the ocean is still incomplete, that the abyss can hold secrets for millions of years, that we are still beginners when it comes to understanding what swims below, and that, when we ask about ancient giants, we're not only chasing myths, we're acknowledging that reality itself has already surprised us in ways myths could never invent. When we think of the deep ocean, the first thing that comes to mind is usually silence. It seems natural to assume that where light cannot reach, sound also falls away, leaving nothing but stillness. Yet if you could sink down into the dark layers of the sea and turn your ears to the water, you'd discover that silence is the last word you'd use. The ocean is alive with sound, not the kind of sound we're used to in the air, but vibrations that roll and echo for miles. Among these, one of the most powerful, haunting and enduring voices belongs to whales. Whale songs are unlike anything else produced by living creatures. They are long, patterned and complex, sometimes lasting for hours, sometimes repeated for days. They travel through water with extraordinary efficiency, carrying across entire ocean basins. To imagine their power, consider this. A blue whale's call can be louder than a jet engine, yet because of the way sound moves through water, it can be heard not just nearby but hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. In the dark, where vision is useless, sound becomes the dominant sense. And for whales, it is not just a tool, it is a language. Picture a humpback whale in the twilight zone, a place already too dark for detail yet still faintly touched by light. It arches its back, dives deeper, and begins to sing. The notes rise and fall, weaving together in patterns that other whales recognize instantly. These songs are not random. They have structure, verses, refrains, shifts in tone. Scientists who study them have compared them to music, not because whales compose in the human sense, but because the patterns are deliberate, repeated, and evolving. In some populations, the entire group of males adopts the same song, which slowly changes over time, as if a whole community is collaborating on a single composition passed from one generation to the next. Other whales make different sounds. Blue whales produce low-frequency calls, so deep that we feel them as much as hear them. Fin whales create rhythmic pulses steady and far-reaching. Sperm whales click, producing bursts of sound used not just for communication, but for echolocation, mapping the dark with returning echoes. Each type of sound has a role: to find food, to navigate, to connect with others, to establish presence across the immense distances of the ocean. And this is where giants enter the story. Because whales are not only the largest animals alive today, some larger than any creature that has ever existed, but they are also acoustic giants, shaping the soundscape of the sea. Their voices carry so far and with such force that they define the auditory environment of the abyss. If you are another animal living in those depths, you live within the echo of whales, whether you want to or not. Their songs become part of the fabric of life. Imagine being a colossal squid drifting in the dark, your enormous eyes tuned to the faintest glimmers of light, your arms poised to strike. Suddenly, a low vibration trembles through the water, a sound so vast it seems to come from the ocean itself. You feel it in your body, a presence nearby, not yet visible but undeniable. That is what it means for whales to sing in the dark. They don't just announce themselves, they fill the environment with awareness of their existence. It's not surprising then that human cultures have long been fascinated by whale sounds. Before modern technology, sailors heard them through the wooden hulls of their ships, strange groans and moans that seemed to rise from the depths. To ears untrained, these must have sounded like the voices of sea monsters, the cries of leviathans hidden below. And in a way, that interpretation wasn't wrong. They were the voices of giants, communicating in ways we could not understand, haunting the deep with songs that refused to be silenced. The discovery of whale songs in the modern era was a revelation. In the 1960s, hydrophones set up by the military to detect submarines accidentally recorded humpback whale songs. At first, the strange drawn-out notes baffled listeners. Then, as scientists studied them, it became clear that these were not random noises. They were organised, intentional, and repeated. The realisation transformed how we thought about whales. They were not just massive bodies moving through the sea, they were singers, composers of soundscapes that spanned oceans. The songs became symbols of mystery and beauty, even inspiring conservation movements that helped protect whales from industrial hunting. But beyond the poetry of it lies something more profound. Whale songs demonstrate how life adapts to the abyss. In a world where light fails, sound takes its place. Where vision cannot function, acoustics dominate. For giants like whales, sound is both a survival tool and a cultural expression. It is how they find each other across thousands of kilometres, how they maintain bonds, how they navigate migrations that span hemispheres. Some whale calls are so low in frequency that they can pass under ambient noise and travel across ocean basins, connecting individuals separated by entire continents. Consider also the endurance of these songs. Just as jellyfish have pulsed for 500 million years, whales have been singing for millions. Fossil evidence shows that large baleen whales began to diversify around 30 million years ago. While we can't record the voices of their ancestors, it's reasonable to imagine that sound has been central to their lives for as long as they've been giants. Every modern whale song is not just a communication in the present. It is an echo of evolutionary strategies stretching back through ages, perfected over millennia. And whales are not alone in using sound. The ocean is filled with acoustic life. Shrimp snap their claws so loudly that entire reefs crackle with their presence. Fish grunt, drum and croak. But whales take this to another level, producing sounds powerful enough to shape the entire ocean soundscape. Their songs are not just communication, they're architecture, building an acoustic world within which other animals must exist. There are mysteries still unsolved. For decades, hydrophones have picked up strange, low-frequency sounds that don't match any known species. One of the most famous was nicknamed the bloop, recorded in the 1990s. It was so loud it could be heard across multiple sensors thousands of kilometres apart. At first, some speculated it might be an unknown giant animal. Later, analyses suggested it was most likely ice cracking and shifting. But the fact that scientists even entertain the possibility of a biological source shows how much room for discovery remains. If whales can sing across oceans, could there be other creatures, perhaps unknown giants, producing sounds we have yet to attribute correctly? Each unexplained recording leaves the door open, and sound carries another weight. It makes giants present even when they are unseen. A whale 100 kilometres away is still part of your environment if its call trembles through the water around you. In that sense, the ocean is never truly empty. It is threaded with voices, constant reminders of life in the dark. For the creatures of the abyss, this is not background noise. It is information, survival, orientation. For us, it is a reminder that the dark is not silent, and that giants announce themselves in ways we cannot ignore. Think again about those early sailors lying awake in wooden bunks, listening to the groans and moans through the hull. They must have felt both fear and wonder, sensing vast beings moving nearby, never visible but always audible. Their legends of sea monsters may have been sparked as much by sound as by sight. The ocean spoke to them, literally, and they interpreted it in the language they had. Myths of leviathans, krakens, and serpents. In truth, what they were hearing were whales, but that doesn't make the stories any less compelling. The reality of whale songs is just as awe-inspiring as any monster tale. And now, with modern instruments, we know that the dark is filled with voices at every moment. Hydrophones record them endlessly, clicks, pulses, moans, songs, choruses. Some species even overlap in their ranges, creating symphonies where multiple whale populations can be heard at once. Imagine drifting in a submersible, lights off, engines silent, and listening. From one direction, the slow, thunderous pulses of a blue whale. From another, the rhythmic patterns of a fin whale. From above, the elaborate verses of a humpback. You'd be surrounded, enveloped, by the voices of giants in the dark. This is what it means for the abyss to be alive. Even where light never shines, even where pressure crushes and cold dominates, life does not just exist. It sings. Giants announce themselves across distances so vast that our imagination struggles to keep up. And in those songs we hear not just communication but the continuation of something ancient, something that has persisted through ages. The dark is not silence, it is music, carried on the backs of giants. When you hear the word crustacean, you probably think of crabs scuttling along a beach, lobsters in tanks at seafood restaurants, or shrimp sizzling in a pan. They seem familiar, manageable, small enough to fit in your hand or on a plate. But that's only because we mostly see the shallow water versions, the ones living close to shore where humans spend their time. Venture deeper, into the abyss where light never reaches, and the image of crustaceans changes dramatically. Down there, in a world of pressure and cold, crustaceans take on proportions that feel almost unreal. They grow to sizes that dwarf our expectations, becoming giants that look more like survivors of prehistory than modern creatures. Take, for instance, the Japanese spider crab. Even among the oddities of the ocean, it stands out. With legs that can stretch more than 4 meters from tip to tip, it is the largest living arthropod on the planet. Imagine standing in a room and having a crab with claws that could reach across the entire space. Its body itself is not massive, about the size of a large plate, but its spindly legs extend outward in every direction, giving it a span wider than most cars. Despite its intimidating size, it isn't a fierce predator. It scavenges mostly, feeding on algae, shellfish, and dead animals that drift down to the seafloor. Still, to see one crawling through the dark, its enormous limbs moving slowly across the sediment, is to see something that looks like it walked out of a science fiction film. And yet it is real, alive today, hidden in the deep waters off Japan. And the Japanese spider crab is not alone in pushing the boundaries of size. In the deep sea, gigantism among crustaceans is common. Isopods, for example, are familiar to us in their small form, the pillbugs or roly-polies we see in gardens, but their deep-sea relatives grow far beyond that scale. The giant isopod discovered in the Atlantic's abyssal depths can reach 0.5 meter in length. Picture a roly-poly the size of a house cat, armoured, segmented and crawling across the seafloor on dozens of legs. They feed on carrion, scavenging whatever dead fish or whales drift down into their range. When food is scarce, they can go for months without eating, their metabolism slow and efficient. When food is abundant, they gorge themselves, sometimes swelling so full they can barely move. It's grotesque and fascinating at once, a creature so ordinary in form yet so extreme in scale. Deep-sea gigantism is not a fluke. It's a pattern that scientists have observed across multiple groups of animals, but it's especially pronounced in crustaceans. Cold temperatures, high pressures, and limited predation all contribute. In the abyss, resources are scarce, and having a larger body can mean being able to travel farther, endure longer between meals, and store more energy. The cold slows metabolism, allowing animals to grow slowly but steadily over time. The pressure demands sturdiness, and exoskeletons provide just that. Over millions of years, these factors combine to produce crustaceans of unthinkable size, survivors shaped not by abundance but by scarcity and endurance. Consider the lobsters of ancient oceans. Fossil evidence suggests that some prehistoric lobsters and shrimp grew to enormous sizes, far beyond what we see today in shallow waters. The conditions of the deep sea today replicate some of those ancient environments, and it may be that the crustaceans we find there are echoes of that earlier age. In this sense, giant isopods and spider crabs are living reminders of what the seas once routinely produced, arthropods that stretched imagination and scale. But the most haunting thought is that these are only the ones we've found. Most of the deep sea remains unexplored. If we have already encountered spider crabs with car-sized spans and isopods, the length of small dogs, what might wait deeper still? Could there be crabs larger than dining tables? Isopods as long as humans, unseen because they live in trenches we rarely visit? It's not speculation without grounding. Every new expedition into the deep brings surprises, often in the form of larger-than-expected crustaceans, glowing shrimps, or massive amphipods that rewrite our assumptions about scale. And remember, crustaceans are not passive. They are armoured, equipped with claws, pincers, and adaptations for survival. A giant crab is not just large, it's formidable. A giant isopod is not just long, it's armoured like a tank. Imagine walking along the seafloor in a submersible and seeing one of these massive shapes crawl out of the darkness, its legs clattering on the sediment, its antennae sweeping the water ahead. The sight would be unnerving, not because it is aggressive, but because it embodies an ancient strangeness, a familiar form magnified into something uncanny. Legends of sea monsters may even owe something to these oversized crustaceans. Sailors pulling up strange catches from deep nets could easily have exaggerated the size in their stories. A spider crab's spindly legs, glimpsed briefly before retreating into the dark, could become tales of enormous sea spiders. A giant isopod, bloated and armoured, could become a story of monstrous beetles lurking in the abyss. The line between fact and myth is thin when the reality is already this bizarre. Crustaceans also play a crucial role in the ecosystems of the deep. They are recyclers, cleaners, scavengers. When a whale dies and sinks to the seafloor, it becomes a whale fall, feeding an entire community of organisms for decades. Giant isopods are among the first to arrive, tearing into the flesh, breaking it down, making the nutrients available to others. Without them, the recycling of organic matter in the deep would stall. In this way, these unthinkably large crustaceans are not just curiosities. They are essential workers in the machinery of the abyss, giants that keep life flowing even in the darkest, coldest places. Think too about their resilience. Crustaceans shed their exoskeletons as they grow, a process called molting. For a brief period after molting, they are vulnerable, their bodies soft, their armour not yet hardened. In the deep sea, this process is even riskier, taking place under immense pressure and in environments where predation can strike suddenly. Yet they manage it, over and over, throughout lifetimes that can stretch decades. To grow to such sizes under these conditions is no small feat. It's a testament to the resilience of their design, and the stability of the abyss as an environment for giants, and they are ancient. Crustaceans as a group go back more than 500 million years, appearing in the Cambrian period alongside trilobites and other early arthropods. Over that vast span of time, they have diversified into countless forms, from tiny planktonic shrimp to enormous lobsters. The giants of today are echoes of a lineage that has endured every mass extinction, every climate shift, every rearrangement of continents. They are survivors, shaped not by a need to dominate, but by a capacity to endure. When you think of ancient giants still lurking in the abyss, it's tempting to imagine massive sharks or squid. But the crustaceans deserve a place in that vision too. Their forms may be less dramatic than toothed jaws or glowing eyes, but their size, their resilience, and their ancient lineage make them just as compelling. A spider crab crawling slowly across the deep sea floor, its legs stretching wider than a man is tall, is as much a giant as any whale. A giant isopod rolling its armoured body across the sand is as much a relic of the past as a coelacanth. And perhaps most haunting of all is the possibility that we have barely glimpsed their true extremes. The abyss hides well. What we know comes from accidents, from the rare nets that descend far enough, from the few submersibles that reach those depths. For every giant isopod documented, there may be a larger one we've never seen. For every spider crab photographed, there may be a relative twice the size, moving slowly through a trench unvisited. Crustaceans, after all, are masters of adaptation. They have endured for 500 million years. It would be no surprise if some of their largest forms remain hidden, waiting, unbothered by our ignorance, thriving in the cold dark where they've always belonged. When we think of worms, the image is usually humble. Earthworms wriggling through soil after rain, small, unremarkable creatures that play their role quietly, but rarely inspire awe. But in the deep sea, as with so many other lineages, the familiar transforms into something astonishing. Down there, worms are not small, soft afterthoughts of biology. They're giants, builders, colonizers, and survivors of extremes. Some stretch meters in length, their bodies armoured in ways that seem alien. Others live in massive tubes, clustered in colonies that resemble forests of red plumes swaying in hot, toxic currents. In the abyss, worms are not modest, they are titans. One of the most striking examples are the giant tube worms, Riftia pachyptila, discovered near hydrothermal vents along the Galapagos Rift in the late 1970s. Before then, no one imagined such creatures existed. The vents themselves were a shock. Cracks in the seafloor where superheated water rich in minerals spewed into the ocean. Scientists expected the environment to be barren, too hot, too toxic for life. Instead, they found ecosystems teeming with creatures, and at the heart of them were these massive worms. Growing up to 3 meters long with white chitinous tubes anchored to the seafloor and bright red plumes extending outward, they looked like something from a dream. A forest of worms taller than a person, thriving in total darkness where the energy source was not sunlight, but chemicals rising from the earth itself. These tube worms don't even have mouths or stomachs. Instead, they host symbiotic bacteria inside their bodies. The bacteria use chemosynthesis, a process that turns hydrogen sulfide from the vents into organic material. The worms provide a home and supply of chemicals, and in return the bacteria provide food. It's a partnership so complete that the worms have abandoned digestion entirely, outsourcing the process to their microscopic tenants. Imagine an animal 3 meters long that survives not by eating but by harbouring entire microbial factories within its tissues. That's what makes them titans of the deep. Not just their size, but the audacity of their existence. And the worms come in many forms. Some build tubes not near vents but in cold seeps, places where methane and other chemicals leak from the seafloor. There they can live for centuries, growing slowly in colonies that last longer than human civilizations. Their tubes accumulate into thickets that stretch across the seabed, forming habitats for other creatures. These colonies are not passive. They shape the ecosystem, providing shelter, structure, and nutrients. They are, in a sense, architects of the abyss, creating communities where none would otherwise exist. Even stranger are the giant worms that live free in the sediment or water column. Some polychaete worms grow to several meters in length, their bristles sharp, their jaws formidable. Fishermen have occasionally pulled up specimens that defy belief. Thick-bodied worms with heads lined by chitinous plates, their forms writhing and snapping. These are not the gentle earthworms of soil. They are predators and scavengers, adapted to seize prey or to burrow deep into sediment. Imagine being in a submersible, drifting across the seafloor, and seeing one emerge from the sand, its body longer than your own height, its jaws gleaming. It's not a myth, it's a reality of the deep. Consider also the bobbit worm, Unis aphroditois, infamous among divers and researchers. While not confined to the deepest zones, it exemplifies the extremes worms can reach. Growing up to 3 meters, it hides in burrows with only its jaws exposed. When a fish passes by, it strikes with lightning speed, snapping shut with enough force to slice its prey in half. Then it drags the body down into its lair, feeding at leisure. These worms are ambush predators, as terrifying in their scale as any shark, yet almost invisible until they strike. For every legendary tale of sea monsters that drag victims into unseen depths, worms like this provide a real-world parallel. Worm gigantism isn't limited to predators. Some of the largest are filter feeders or scavengers, stretching long bodies across the sediment to collect organic particles, marine snow or carrion. In an environment where food is scarce, size offers efficiency. A larger body can cover more ground, store more energy, and endure longer between meals. Just as with crustaceans and isopods, the abyss encourages worms to grow far beyond the scale we consider normal. It's not indulgence, it's survival strategy. And worms are ancient. Their lineage stretches back to the Cambrian period, more than 500 million years ago, when the first complex ecosystems were forming in the oceans. Fossils show segmented worms already experimenting with bristles, jaws and tubes. They were pioneers of many lifestyles, from burrowing to building. The giant tube worms and their kin are not accidents of modern evolution. They are continuations of a lineage that has endured mass extinctions, climate shifts, and continental drift. Their survival is proof of how versatile and resilient worms can be. What's especially haunting is how little we know about their extremes. Every time a new hydrothermal vent system is explored, new species of giant worms are discovered. Some are red-plumed, like the classic riftia. Others are pale, translucent, their bodies glowing faintly with reflected light. Some form colonies unlike anything seen before, with tubes stretching in tangled masses across the vent chimneys. These are not rare anomalies. They are dominant members of their ecosystems, present wherever vents or seeps appear. And since vents are scattered across the globe, often miles beneath the surface in places we've never reached, the diversity and potential size of these worms is still largely a mystery. Think of what that means for our search for ancient giants. Worms may not inspire the same awe as whales or squids at first glance, but their presence demonstrates a truth. The abyss breeds extremes in every form of life. Even creatures we think of as small, simple and ordinary can become titanic in the right conditions. A tube worm colony rising like a forest in the dark is as much a giant as any colossal squid. A predatory worm snapping its jaws shut on prey half its size is as formidable as any shark. The giants of the abyss are not only those that dominate by mass, but also those that dominate by numbers, architecture, and sheer alien strangeness. It's worth remembering too that worms are not silent. Hydrothermal vent colonies are alive with movement, with the constant swaying of plumes, the pulsing of fluids, the scraping of chitinous bristles against tubes. If you could listen closely, you'd hear not silence, but the subtle symphony of life thriving in extremes. To witness it is to see life not as fragile, but as defiant, thriving in places we once thought lifeless. And beyond vents and seeps, Worms extend into trenches, into abyssal plains, into every corner of the deep. Some burrow meters into sediment, building labyrinths. Others drift in the water column, their bodies trailing like ribbons, catching particles as they descend. Each form stretches the limits of what a worm can be, and in doing so stretches our imagination of what life can do. So when we ask what ancient giants still lurk in the abyss, worms deserve a place in the answer. Not because they are the biggest animals by weight or length, but because they embody the principle of gigantism where we least expect it. They turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. They transform modest designs into titanic realities. They show us that even in the darkest, harshest corners of the earth, life not only survives, but flourishes in forms that challenge everything we thought we knew. The deeper you go into the ocean, the stranger the rules become. Light disappears, pressure multiplies to levels that would crush submarines if they weren't engineered with care. Temperatures hover near freezing, and food is scarce, drifting down only in the form of what scientists call marine snow, tiny flakes of dead plankton, fecal pellets, and fragments of organic matter falling slowly from the surface. At first glance, you might expect life in such a place to be small, fragile, minimal, and in some cases it is. But time and again, explorers have discovered the opposite. In the abyss, life doesn't always shrink. Sometimes it grows, and grows to astonishing proportions. This phenomenon is what scientists call deep-sea gigantism. The idea is simple, but the reality is staggering. In the deep ocean, species that are small or modest near the surface often grow into giants. Crustaceans become enormous isopods, and crabs with spans wider than a person is tall. Worms become titans that stretch meters across the seafloor. Squids reach colossal lengths. Jellyfish trail tentacles longer than whales. Even amphipods, the tiny shrimp-like creatures that scuttle around in shallow waters, become giants in the depths, some growing larger than a human hand. It's as if the abyss itself encourages excess, as if life, when pressed by darkness and cold, decides to answer by becoming vast. Why this happens has fascinated scientists for decades. Several theories exist, none of them exclusive, and all of them painting a picture of how different life in the abyss really is. One explanation lies in temperature. The deep ocean is cold, close to freezing, and metabolism slows in the cold. Slow metabolism allows animals to grow gradually but steadily over long lifespans. Instead of burning energy quickly, they conserve it, adding size little by little, until they reach scales impossible in warmer waters. Another factor is pressure. At depths where the weight of water above is thousands of times greater than at the surface, small, fragile bodies struggle. Larger, sturdier forms cope better, their volume giving them resilience against crushing force. Food scarcity also plays a role. At first it seems contradictory. Wouldn't scarcity favour smaller bodies needing less energy? But in the abyss, being large has advantages. A larger body can store energy, endure long stretches without eating, and travel farther in search of food. It's a strategy of endurance, not efficiency. Think of giant isopods, able to gorge themselves when a carcass falls to the seafloor, swelling so full they can barely move, then surviving for months afterward without another meal. Small animals couldn't manage that, but giants can. Predation pressure is another piece of the puzzle. In shallow waters, predators are abundant and being small and quick is often safer. In the deep sea, predators are fewer, and being large may deter attack. When the risk of being eaten drops, size can increase without penalty. Over millions of years, these pressures combined to create an environment where gigantism thrives. The abyss doesn't just allow giants, it produces them. Examples abound. The Japanese spider crab with its sprawling legs, the giant isopod like a monstrous pill bug, the colossal squid with eyes the size of basketballs, the lion's mane jellyfish with its kilometers of tentacles. Each is a testament to the principle. And these are only the ones we've found. Each expedition deeper into trenches and unexplored basins brings discoveries of new species larger than expected. Giant amphipods pulled from the Mariana Trench stunned scientists by being 10 times the size of their shallow water relatives. These were not rare freaks. They were healthy, thriving members of their population, proof that gigantism is normal in the abyss, and it isn't limited to animals we consider traditionally impressive. Even starfish and sea cucumbers take on giant proportions in the deep. In some regions, they cover the seafloor like carpets, each individual far larger than its shallow water cousins. Imagine walking into a room expecting ants and finding dogs instead, each shaped the same as the smaller version, but multiplied in size. That's the shock scientists feel again and again as they explore deeper. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of deep-sea gigantism is what it suggests. If small lineages can become giants under the right conditions, what about larger lineages? If tiny amphipods can reach the size of a human hand, if pillbugs can grow to 0.5 meter, if squids can become colossal, then why not sharks, fish, or reptiles of proportions beyond what we expect? The principle opens the door to possibility. It tells us that the abyss doesn't just shelter the old, it amplifies it. Legends of sea monsters, when seen through this lens, gain new credibility. Sailors spoke of serpents stretching across the waves, of crabs large enough to crush boats, of fish the size of islands. While exaggeration is inevitable, the root of these stories may well lie in glimpses of real giants produced by this very phenomenon. The abyss encourages size. It nurtures it quietly in darkness, until one day a specimen rises by accident, washed upward by currents or caught in a net, startling whoever sees it. For the people of the past, such sightings weren't biology. They were myth. For us, they are reminders of how much we still don't know. It's worth pausing on the psychological impact of gigantism. We're used to thinking of ourselves as central, as large relative to most life around us. But when you place yourself next to a lion's mane, jellyfish trailing tentacles longer than a football field, or a squid with eyes bigger than your head, the scale shifts. You are small, and the abyss is vast. Gigantism forces humility. It reminds us that we are not the measure of size, but merely one point on the spectrum. In the ocean, scale stretches far beyond our everyday experience, and gigantism isn't only about length or width, it's about presence. A giant isopod crawling across the seafloor changes the landscape. A colony of tube worms meters high transforms a vent into a forest. A colossal squid lurking in the dark changes the behaviour of whales. These giants are not isolated curiosities. They are forces shaping ecosystems, their size giving them roles and powers smaller creatures cannot fulfill. The abyss is not just home to giants, it is built by them. What's most intriguing is how consistent the pattern is across different lineages. It suggests that gigantism is not an accident but a rule of the abyss. Wherever conditions converge, cold, pressure, scarcity and stability, size expands. That means there may be no true limit, except those imposed by physics and biology. Already we know of blue whales on the surface reaching nearly 30 meters, the largest animals ever to live. If the surface can support that size, who is to say the abyss cannot harbour something comparable or even greater, shaped by pressures we don't yet understand? Each discovery edges us closer to that possibility. The first time giant isopods were hauled up, they shocked the scientific community. The first time colossal squids were pulled aboard, they redefined myths. The first time giant amphipods were caught, they reminded us that even the smallest lineages could stretch the imagination. Again and again, the abyss proves that size is one of its chosen expressions of life. And if that's true, then the idea of giants still undiscovered isn't fantasy, it's expectation. So when we speak of gigantism of the abyss, we're not speaking only of the animals already known. We are speaking of a principle, a tendency, a rule of survival in the dark. The ocean encourages size. It nurtures giants quietly. away from our eyes, until we stumble upon them and revise our understanding once again. In this way, every known giant is both an answer and a hint. It answers the question of whether large creatures can thrive in the abyss. They can, and do. But it also hints that for every giant we've found, there may be others we haven't, waiting still, shaped by the same pressures, nurtured by the same rules, hidden in the same dark. When people talk about ghosts, they usually mean spirits of the dead, echoes of something lost that refuse to disappear. But the ocean has its own kind of ghosts, and they're not made of mist or memory. They're made of flesh and bone, scale and fin, muscle and cartilage. They are the living remnants of prehistoric seas, creatures that look like they swam straight out of the fossil record into the present. In their presence, you feel time collapse. They are both past and present at once, living ghosts of worlds that no longer exist. Think of the coelacanth, rediscovered in the 20th century after being thought extinct for 60 million years. Or the nautilus, drifting in its chambered shell almost unchanged since before the dinosaurs. Or the frilled shark, its body recalling an era when the oceans were dominated by strange, long-extinct predators. Each of these is a survivor of time, a reminder that the ocean is not just water, but a reservoir of history, holding lineages that elsewhere on Earth were lost. To encounter them is to meet not just an animal, but an echo, the kind of echo that carries entire ages within it. The nautilus, for example, is a creature so simple in form that it almost seems decorative. Its spiral shell, divided into chambers, is both beautiful and functional. It uses those chambers to regulate buoyancy, pumping gases in and out to rise or sink. For 500 million years, nautiluses and their relatives have used this same trick. Their ancient cousins, the ammonites, once filled the seas in staggering numbers, evolving into countless shapes before vanishing in the same extinction that killed the dinosaurs. The nautilus somehow survived. Today it drifts quietly in deep waters near reefs, a living ghost of a dynasty that once ruled the oceans. Hold a nautilus shell in your hand, and you're holding a design that predates mammals, birds and flowers. It's as if you're holding time itself. Or consider the frilled shark. With its long eel-like body, gills that fan out like a ruffled collar, and teeth arranged in hundreds of needle-sharp rows, it looks more like something you'd expect in a fossil display than in living waters. It rarely comes to the surface, preferring the deep, where it hunts by lunging at prey in sudden bursts. Its design is ancient, unchanged for tens of millions of years, its very survival a testament to the abyss as a refuge for old lineages. Encounter one and you'd swear you were looking at a prehistoric predator, a ghost of the seas that somehow forgot to vanish. But the ghosts of prehistoric seas are not always single species. Sometimes they are entire lineages that refuse extinction. Jellyfish are among the most striking examples. Fossils of jellyfish more than 500 million years old show shapes almost identical to modern species. They have outlasted mass extinctions, ice ages, asteroid strikes and climate upheavals, all while remaining soft, fragile and apparently vulnerable. Yet their very simplicity has given them resilience, allowing them to persist when more complex creatures faltered. In their pulsing bells and trailing tentacles, you see the outline of Earth's earliest complex life, still drifting in our oceans today. And then there are the sharks as a group, older than trees, their fossil teeth scattered across ancient seabeds like a record of unbroken presence. The megalodon may be gone, but its smaller relatives, some still enormous by our standards, carry its ghost forward. When you look at the serrated teeth of a great white, you're seeing a modern echo of designs perfected millions of years ago. When you watch a Greenland shark move slowly under the ice, you're seeing a creature whose lineage predates the rise of forests, an animal whose very body feels like a shadow of a much older ocean. Ghosts also linger in forms less familiar. Horseshoe crabs, for instance, are not true crabs at all, but relatives of ancient trilobites. Their armoured shells and long spiked tails look alien, but they have scuttled along coasts for more than 450 million years, surviving when almost every other lineage from their time has perished. Their blood, copper-based and pale blue, is used in modern medicine to test for contamination. Every time we inject a vaccine or sterilize equipment, the ghost of an ancient lineage is at work inside our technology. A creature that predates dinosaurs is helping us live in the present. The abyss is where many of these ghosts are best preserved. On land, environments change quickly. Ice ages advance and retreat. Forests grow and burn. Deserts expand and contract. But the deep sea is stable. Cold, dark, and largely untouched, it acts like a time capsule, preserving lineages that elsewhere would have disappeared. That's why so many living fossils are found there. The abyss is not just a place of darkness. It's a sanctuary of time, where the ghosts of prehistoric seas still drift and hunt. And the idea of ghosts doesn't only apply to the creatures we know, it applies also to the creatures we don't. For every coelacanth that has reappeared, there may be others waiting. For every nautilus still drifting, there may be cousins we haven't yet seen. The fossil record is filled with lineages we assume are gone, but the abyss has a way of making us humble. Each rediscovery is a reminder that absence in fossils does not always mean extinction in reality. It may simply mean we haven't looked deep enough. There is a kind of haunting in this, to realize that the ocean carries echoes of ages long past. Living among us but hidden in the dark is to see time differently. It is no longer a straight line from past to present, with fossils as markers of what was. It is a loop, a circle, with fragments of the past still swimming alongside us. We share the planet not just with modern life, but with the survivors of prehistory, creatures that make the word extinct feel less certain. Think of the psychological weight this carries. When sailors in earlier centuries glimpsed strange shapes in the water, long bodies, glowing forms, armoured shells, they often interpreted them as monsters, unnatural beings rising from the abyss. In truth, many of those glimpses may have been ghosts of prehistoric seas, lineages so ancient and strange that they seemed unreal. A nautilus flashing in lamplight, a frilled shark caught in a net, a giant isopod hauled up from the deep. Each of these could inspire stories not because they were imaginary, but because they were too real, too ancient, too different from anything familiar. And even today, our encounters with these ghosts carry the same resonance. When scientists filmed a coelacanth swimming in its natural habitat, its fins moving like proto-legs, the footage stunned the world. It wasn't just biology, it was time travel. Watching it was like seeing a piece of the Devonian era alive on screen, a living memory of an age-long thought erased. Every such encounter shakes our confidence in what we know, reminding us that the ocean is not fully catalogued, not fully mapped, not fully ours to understand. The ghosts of prehistoric seas are not illusions, they are reminders. They remind us that survival can take many forms, that some lineages endure by changing constantly while others endure by refusing to change at all. They remind us that extinction is sometimes a story we tell too quickly, forgetting the vastness of the ocean and the possibility of hidden refuges. They remind us that the abyss is not just a place of mystery, but a place where time itself folds, bringing past and present together in a way no other environment can. So when we wonder about ancient giants still lurking in the abyss, these ghosts give us a reason to wonder seriously. If the nautilus still drifts, if the coelacanth still swims, if sharks older than trees still circle quietly, then who can say what else lingers? The ocean has already proven that it can keep secrets for millions of years, and every ghost we find is a promise that there are more, waiting still, just beyond the reach of light. If there's one feature that defines life in the abyss, it's the eye. In the absence of sunlight, vision should be useless. After all, when darkness is absolute, what good is sight? And yet, nature rarely abandons a tool without reimagining it. In the deep ocean, eyes have not disappeared. They have grown, transformed, and adapted into forms that look like science fiction. Some are vast, the largest eyes of any creature on Earth. Others are strange, tubular, staring upward to catch the faintest glimmer of light from above. Some can even rotate within their heads like periscopes, scanning for shadows in the gloom. In the abyss, eyes become like headlights, glowing, enormous, and haunting in their adaptation to darkness. The most famous example is the colossal squid. It is not just large in body, it has the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. Each one is bigger than a human head, wider than a dinner plate, gleaming orbs that seem too exaggerated to be real. But they are real, and they serve a crucial purpose. With eyes that large, the squid can detect faint movements and flashes of bioluminescence at great distances. In a world where prey and predators are often signalled only by the glow of light-producing organs, an eye that can magnify that faintest glimmer is the difference between life and death. Imagine being suspended in the abyss, nothing visible around you, and then your massive eyes catch the brief flicker of a whale's silhouette or the faint shimmer of a fish's scales. Those eyes are not just sight, they are survival. And the colossal squid isn't alone. The giant squid also possesses massive eyes, though slightly smaller, still far beyond the scale of most animals. These giants live in constant battle with sperm whales, their main predator, and their eyes give them a crucial advantage. A whale may approach silently, its clicks echoing through the water, but a squid with eyes like headlights can sometimes see the shadow first, catching just enough warning to escape into the blackness. It's a battle of senses. Whales dominate with sound, squids with sight. In that contest, eyes have grown to enormous size, a natural escalation in the arms race of survival. Other creatures use a different strategy. The barrelly fish, for instance, has tubular eyes encased in a transparent dome on its head. These eyes point upward, designed to catch silhouettes of animals drifting overhead. From the fish's perspective, the faint outlines of prey stand out against the dim glow filtering from the surface. But the real marvel is that these eyes can rotate. They can swivel forward when the fish wants to look ahead, or back upward to continue watching the shadows above. Imagine having headlights that could pivot in any direction, adjusting to wherever the faintest trace of light might appear. That's the barrel eye's gift, a solution to a world where vision is almost impossible. Then there are creatures that take light into their own hands. Many deep-sea fish have eyes that glow, reflecting light from bioluminescent organs. Some are equipped with photophores under their eyes, creating the effect of built-in lanterns. These headlights don't just help the fish see, they help them hunt. By shining faint beams, they can illuminate small prey, drawing it into striking range. To us, it looks like a car in the dark, twin orbs of light hovering in the abyss, moving slowly as if searching for a road. For smaller creatures caught in that glow, it's the last light they'll ever see. Consider the lanternfish, one of the most abundant animals in the ocean. Individually, they're not massive, but their collective presence defines entire ecosystems. They rise to the surface at night in the largest migration on Earth, then sink back into the depth by day. Along their bodies are rows of photophores, glowing patterns that may help with camouflage or communication. Their eyes, tuned to faint blue light, can see these signals clearly even in the abyss. When billions of them rise together, they create a living galaxy of points of light, a migration visible not just to each other but to predators that hunt them. In this way, headlights don't just belong to giants, they belong to the multitudes, to entire populations lighting the deep. And yet, the giants push this adaptation further. The Pacific hatchetfish, with its enormous upward-facing eyes, has mirrored scales that reflect what little light penetrates. To predators below, it vanishes into the darkness, but its eyes remain wide, searching constantly for food drifting overhead. This theme repeats across the abyss. eyes becoming oversized, specialized, and finely tuned to grasp whatever trace of light exists. Because down there, every photon counts. There are even cases where eyes become redundant and vanish, replaced by other senses. Some worms and crustaceans in the deepest trenches are completely blind, their eyes reduced to vestiges. They navigate by touch, by chemical cues, by vibrations. But many others have gone the opposite route, investing everything into sight. It's a reminder that the abyss is not one uniform environment but a mosaic. In some regions, sight is useless. In others, it is everything. And where it is everything, evolution builds eyes like headlights, massive, strange, and sometimes even luminous. Think for a moment what it would be like to encounter one of these giants. You're in a submersible, lights off, drifting silently in the dark. At first there is nothing, just blackness pressing in from every side. Then, suddenly a reflection. Two vast orbs gleaming faintly, catching the glimmer of your vessel's lights. They hang in the dark like moons, unblinking, staring, and then they move, attached to a form too large to take in all at once. You would feel small, insignificant, as if you had stumbled into the path of a ghostly searchlight scanning the dark. That is the effect of eyes like headlights. They are not passive. They announce presence, command attention, and alter the entire landscape of the abyss. The mythology of the sea has long included glowing eyes. Sailors told stories of monsters with eyes like burning coals or lanterns that shone from the depths. Perhaps these stories weren't entirely invention. Perhaps they were echoes of real encounters, glimpses of bioluminescent fish, of squids with gleaming eyes, of reflections seen in the dark. When reality already provides eyes the size of human heads, or creatures that literally produce light from their faces, the distance between myth and truth is not so wide. And even today, our technology records strange sounds and strange lights in the abyss. Some unexplained flashes caught on cameras resemble eyes reflecting light. Others are moving glows that could easily be mistaken for headlights drifting in the dark. Whether these are known creatures or unknown giants, the impression is the same. The deep is not blind. It is filled with watchers, with beings whose vision is adapted to what we cannot comprehend. For them, the abyss is not darkness. It is visibility on another spectrum with eyes that make the invisible visible. This is perhaps the greatest shift of perspective. To us, the abyss is unknowable, sightless, empty. To its inhabitants, it is alive with light invisible to us. Their eyes, oversized and specialized, reveal what we cannot see. In that sense, they carry knowledge we can never fully share. Their headlights illuminate a world hidden from us, one where giants move unseen until their eyes betray them. And it's that thought, that even in darkness you're always being watched, that makes the abyss feel haunted, alive, and endless. If there is one element that defines the abyss more than darkness, more than cold, it is pressure. It is the most invisible force, one you cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot touch in the way we touch air or water. And yet in the deep ocean, it is constant and absolute, pressing down from every side with a weight that defies imagination. For every 10 meters you descend, the pressure increases by about 1 atmosphere, the same weight of air that presses on us here at the surface. At 1,000 meters, that means 100 atmospheres. At 4,000 meters, 400. In the deepest trenches, nearly 11,000 meters down, the pressure is more than 1,000 times what we experience on land. It's the equivalent of the weight of 50 jumbo jets pressing on every square meter of your body. No machine we casually use, no submarine designed for the surface, could withstand that kind of crushing force. And yet, life does. The creatures of the abyss are not just survivors, they are masters of pressure. Their bodies are not armoured tanks or rigid shells, but soft, flexible, often gelatinous forms that yield instead of resisting. It seems counterintuitive, We imagine strength as hardness, durability as armour. But in the deep, survival often comes from the opposite. By being pliable, by having bodies without air pockets or rigid cavities, these animals let the pressure flow through them. There is nothing to crush if there is nothing hollow. Their cells are adapted to function under immense weight. Their proteins structured to resist denaturation. Their membranes fortified to maintain fluidity in extremes. It is biology at its most alien, invisible adaptations that allow life to exist where, by all logic, it should be impossible. Take the hadal amphipods, for instance. These small crustaceans live in the deepest trenches, more than 10 kilometres below the surface. Their bodies are translucent, fragile-looking, and yet perfectly functional under crushing pressure. Researchers have found that they produce unique molecules called piezolites, compounds that stabilise proteins and prevent them from being squeezed out of shape by pressure. Without them, their enzymes would collapse, their cells would fail, and life would end instantly. Instead, they thrive, feeding on organic debris that sinks into the trench, living out entire life cycles in an environment harsher than the vacuum of space. That comparison is worth pausing on. Space is often described as humanity's ultimate frontier, but from the perspective of pressure, the deep ocean is more hostile. In space, there is no pressure at all, a vacuum. In the abyss, pressure is overwhelming, constant, and unrelenting. To build machines for space is to insulate against nothingness. To build machines for the deep is to resist the crushing weight of an entire planet's ocean. That's why the number of humans who have been to the deepest trench is fewer than those who have walked on the moon. Pressure is the true wall between us and the abyss, and yet pressure is not always an enemy. For the giants of the deep, it shapes their very existence. The colossal squid, the giant isopod, the abyssal fish, all of them are products of an environment where pressure has dictated form. Some rely on watery, gelatinous bodies that are incompressible. Others rely on oils instead of gases for buoyancy, avoiding the fatal collapse that would happen if they depended on air-filled bladders like many shallow fish do. Their very chemistry is tuned to pressure, and without it, they cannot survive. Bring many of them to the surface, and they die not from lack of oxygen or food, but from the sudden release of pressure. Their bodies rupture, their cells fail, their delicate balance is destroyed. They are creatures bound to their environment, existing only where the weight of the world presses down on them constantly. This reality raises questions about undiscovered giants. If pressure makes survival possible for creatures we already know, if it allows the colossal squid's eyes to evolve to the size of dinner plates, if it allows worms to grow meters long and crustaceans to reach the scale of household pets or larger, then what other adaptations might pressure encourage? Could it allow even greater sizes, stranger forms, more alien anatomies? The deeper we go, the more extreme the conditions, the more likely it is that something extraordinary has evolved there, hidden beyond our reach. We know so little about the deepest trenches. Expeditions are rare, equipment is fragile, and the cost is immense. Most of our knowledge comes not from direct observation, but from what gets caught in traps or rises accidentally to the surface. Even so, each expedition brings surprises. Amphipods bigger than expected. Fish with bodies unlike any we've seen before. Microbes thriving in sediments that experience pressures we can barely replicate in laboratories. These discoveries tell us one thing clearly. Life is not just possible under pressure. It is flourishing. And if life flourishes, gigantism and strangeness are almost guaranteed. For the creatures themselves, pressure defines not only their physiology, but their entire experience of the world. Imagine being a fish in the hadal zone. Your body is perfectly adapted so you don't feel crushed, but every flick of your fins, every beat of your heart is shaped by that invisible weight. Your movements are slow, deliberate, not because you are weak, but because the environment has sculpted you to conserve energy, to endure. Pressure is your constant companion, your invisible ocean within the ocean, a force so absolute that it has become normal. For these creatures, our world at the surface would be unbearable. a place where the absence of pressure feels as lethal as its overwhelming presence does to us. Pressure also affects sound. In the deep ocean, where pressure is immense and temperatures are stable, sound travels farther and faster than at the surface. That's one reason why whale songs can be heard across entire ocean basins. It's also why submarines can be detected at long ranges by hydrophones. The abyss is a world not of sight but of sound, and pressure makes that possible. For giants of the deep, this acoustic environment may be just as important as the physical one. Their eyes may adapt to faint light, but their bodies also exist within an acoustic world shaped by the physics of pressure. The most haunting aspect of pressure is that it hides things. It creates an environment so hostile to us that most of the abyss remains unexplored. Every kilometre deeper is exponentially more difficult to reach, and beyond a certain point only specially engineered vessels can survive even for brief periods. That means vast regions of our own planet remain unknown to us, accessible only to the creatures adapted to them. If ancient giants still lurk in the abyss, pressure is their shield, their fortress, their guarantee of secrecy. Think of the trenches, the Mariana, the Tonga, the Kermadec. Each of them plunges deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Each is filled with pressure beyond imagination. Each is almost entirely unexplored. If a creature the size of a bus or even larger were to drift through those depths, we might never know. Our cameras have only scratched the surface. Our traps have only sampled scraps. Our submersibles have only stayed for minutes or hours at a time. Pressure is not just a physical barrier, it is a curtain hiding whatever lies behind it. And so, when we wonder what might still be alive in the abyss, pressure must always be part of the answer. It is both the enemy and the enabler, crushing to us but nurturing to them. It is the reason the abyss is stable, the reason ancient lineages survive, the reason gigantism thrives, and the reason so much remains hidden. The abyss is not empty, it is simply locked, and the key is pressure. Until we can bear it, we will only ever glimpse fragments of the giants it protects. When you picture the abyss, the first thing that comes to mind is darkness. Not the kind of darkness you get when you turn off the lights in your room at night, not even the darkness of a cave or a tunnel, but an absolute, endless blackness, deeper than anything most of us can imagine. Sunlight can only penetrate so far, and by the time you're a few hundred meters down, it's gone completely. Below that, there is no day or night. It is always dark. And yet, despite this, the abyss is not a world without light. It is full of it. Creatures make their own, filling the water with faint glows, flashes, sparks, and eerie lanterns. Bioluminescence, the ability to produce light in total darkness, is one of the most widespread adaptations in the deep sea, and in many ways, it is the signature of life in the abyss. The first time scientists lowered cameras into deep waters and saw the sudden flash of a light that wasn't theirs, it must have been shocking. A fish glowing blue in the dark, a squid releasing a cloud of shimmering sparks, a jellyfish pulsing with waves of green light along its bell. The abyss, which from above looks like a place of emptiness, is in fact alive with illumination. But this light isn't like ours. It isn't used to brighten rooms or guide steps. It is communication, camouflage, hunting strategy, defense mechanism. It is life's way of turning the blackness into a tool instead of a barrier. Some of the most famous examples are anglerfish, those small but terrifying predators with lanterns dangling from rods on their heads. Their bioluminescent lures are filled with symbiotic bacteria that produce light. In the blackness, a faint glow attracts smaller fish, curious or fooled into thinking it's food. When they get close, the anglerfish strikes with jaws that seem far too large for its body. It's a cruel trick, but it works, and in an environment where food is rare, it can mean the difference between survival and starvation. Those tiny lanterns are not just light, they're bait. But bioluminescence comes in countless other forms. Some creatures glow faintly all over, their bodies shimmering softly as they move. Others produce sudden flashes, blinding predators or startling prey. Some squid can eject glowing clouds, like underwater fireworks, confusing attackers while they escape. Others use patterns of light to communicate, pulsing signals like Morse code across the dark. The hatchetfish has rows of photophores along its belly that match the faint light filtering from above, making it invisible to predators looking up from below. To us, these glowing dots look like decoration. To the fish, they are camouflage. The range of colours is limited but meaningful. Most deep-sea bioluminescence is blue or green, because those wavelengths travel farthest through water. A few species, however, produce red or even infrared light. Since most creatures of the deep cannot see red, this becomes a kind of invisible flashlight. Certain dragonfish, for instance, have both red bioluminescence and the rare ability to see it, giving them an advantage. They can shine light on prey without being seen themselves. It's like carrying a night vision scope into a world where everyone else is blind to that spectrum. And then there are displays that defy easy explanation. Some jellyfish can produce cascades of light that ripple across their bodies in hypnotic waves. Some copepods, tiny plankton, release glowing trails that linger in the water, marking their path long after they've fled. The deep sea shrimp Acanthophira can shoot jets of glowing fluid from its mouth, as if spitting liquid fire. Each of these adaptations seems almost magical, yet each is perfectly suited to the rules of the abyss. Light is weapon, shield, language, disguise. What makes all of this even more striking is how common it is. Estimates suggest that the majority of animals in the deep sea are bioluminescent. It isn't rare or exceptional, it's normal, which means that if you were to turn off the lights in a submersible and sit in silence, you wouldn't see nothing. You'd see flashes, pulses, glows all around you, a living constellation drifting in slow motion. It would feel like floating through the night sky, except the stars are alive, moving, hunting and watching. Imagine being a whale diving through the blackness. As you descend, the last sunlight disappears, and then around you, faint glows begin to appear. The flicker of squid startled by your presence. The steady glow of lanternfish migrating upward. The brief spark of a jellyfish stung by a predator. To the whale, this is not a spectacle, it's the environment. But to us, it would be breathtaking, an ocean galaxy hidden beneath the surface of the Earth. And bioluminescence connects directly to the idea of giants. Because when creatures grow large in the abyss, their lights grow large with them. A colossal squid doesn't just have enormous eyes, it also has glowing organs that can light up its body. A siphonophore, a colonial organism that can stretch over 40 meters, longer than a blue whale, is lined with glowing sections that make it look like a chain of lanterns drifting endlessly through the dark. Some of the largest jellyfish have bioluminescent tentacles stretching dozens of meters, each strand glowing as it moves. In such cases, the light doesn't just mark an individual, it marks a giant turning blackness into a stage for something vast, luminous and alive. There's a reason myths of sea monsters often include glowing eyes or radiant bodies. Sailors saw things, maybe not entire colossal squids breaching the surface, but flashes of light, trails of glowing fluid, shimmering shapes beneath their ships. To people unfamiliar with the science of bioluminescence, these sights must have seemed supernatural. A sea serpent with glowing eyes, a leviathan with a body lit from within, a ghostly army of lights rising from the deep. The truth is stranger still, not monsters, but entire ecosystems designed to shine in darkness, to weaponize light in ways we still barely understand. And for us, bioluminescence is not just beautiful, it's practical. We've learnt from it. The proteins that make jellyfish glow, for instance, have been adapted into some of the most powerful tools in modern biology. Green fluorescent protein, first isolated from a jellyfish, is now used in labs to track cellular processes, to illuminate the hidden workings of life. Every time a scientist looks at a glowing cell under a microscope, they're seeing the echo of deep-sea light, repurposed for our world. The abyss doesn't just hide giants, it gifts us knowledge, if we're willing to look. What's most haunting is that we've only seen fragments. Most bioluminescent creatures live too deep for casual observation. Our glimpses come from cameras, from nets, from fleeting moments when they're startled into glowing. But imagine an entire trench lit up, not by our machines, but by its inhabitants. Imagine drifting through a canyon miles below the surface and seeing walls dotted with glowing tube worms, schools of lanternfish rising like sparks, siphonophores stretching like illuminated ropes across the darkness. We think of the abyss as black, but to its creatures it may be vibrant, alive with constant flashes and glimmers. A different kind of light, but light all the same. And that's the paradox. The deepest, darkest part of our planet is also one of the brightest. Not with sunlight, but with life's own inventions. Lights in the blackness aren't rare exceptions, they are the rule. And where there is light, there is the suggestion of presence. For every flicker we recognise, there may be others beyond our sight, lights belonging to creatures too large, too strange, or too rare to have been caught yet. Giants with luminous organs drifting unseen, leaving only trails of glow in their wake. In the abyss, that possibility is not fantasy, it is expectation, waiting still in the blackness. When you picture a forest, it's easy to see how everything connects. Trees stretch upward, birds nest in branches, insects crawl along trunks, fungi decompose fallen logs. The food web is obvious, visible all around you, but in the abyss, where darkness reigns, where pressure crushes, where almost nothing grows in the conventional sense, the food web seems less clear. And yet, it exists. It is delicate, complex, and often depends on things far above. Understanding it is like piecing together a puzzle where most of the pieces are missing, yet what we do know reveals an intricate system that allows life to endure in one of the harshest environments on Earth. At the base of most ecosystems is sunlight. Plants capture it, algae convert it, photosynthesis drives the flow of energy that supports everything else. But in the abyss, sunlight is gone. Photosynthesis cannot exist. Instead, life depends on what drifts down from above. Scientists call it marine snow, a gentle rain of organic matter falling from the surface. Dead plankton, fecal pellets, bits of tissue, fragments of plants. It drifts slowly, sometimes taking weeks to reach the bottom. To us, it would look like dust motes floating through a dark room, except each particle is food, each particle a lifeline for the creatures below. Marine snow feeds the small, which feed the large, which feed the giants. Without it, the abyss would starve. Sometimes the food comes not as a gentle rain, but as a storm. When a large animal dies at the surface and sinks, it becomes a whale fall. A single whale carcass can feed an entire community of organisms for decades. First come the scavengers, giant isopods, hagfish, amphipods, tearing into flesh and stripping it clean. Then come the specialists, worms and bacteria that burrow into the bones, extracting oil and nutrients long after the meat is gone. Around these carcasses, entire ecosystems arise, species found nowhere else, surviving entirely on the resources of a single fallen giant. It is a strange inversion of the food web. Instead of many small things feeding a large one large body feeds multitudes. In the abyss, death is not an end but a foundation. Yet marine snow and whale falls are not the only sources of food. In some places, the food web begins not with sunlight but with chemistry. At hydrothermal vents, chemicals spew from the earth, rich in hydrogen, sulfide and other compounds. There, bacteria use chemosynthesis instead of photosynthesis, converting chemicals into energy. These bacteria form the base of a unique food web, one that supports giant tube worms, clams, crabs and fish. The vents create oases in the dark, pockets of abundance where life blooms in forms that seem impossible anywhere else. Entire communities exist here, fueled by Earth's inner fire rather than the sun. Cold seeps work similarly, though on a slower scale. Methane and other hydrocarbons seep from the seafloor, feeding microbes that in turn support mussels, worms and shrimp. These systems can last for centuries, providing a stable base for food webs entirely independent of the surface world. In this way, the abyss teaches us that food webs don't have to begin with light. They can begin with rock, with gas, with heat. Life finds a way to build chains of energy wherever it can. But the abyssal food web is fragile. Marine snow may seem constant, but its volume depends on surface conditions. A bloom of plankton above means abundance below. A collapse at the surface can mean famine in the deep. Whalefalls are unpredictable, scattered, rare. Vents and seeps are localized, small islands of productivity in a vast desert. For most of the abyss, food is scarce, and survival means stretching energy as far as possible. That is why so many abyssal creatures grow slowly, live long, and move minimally. They cannot afford to waste energy. Every meal counts. This scarcity shapes giants as much as it shapes small creatures. A giant isopod can gorge on a whalefall, then survive for months without another meal. A Greenland shark can move slowly, its metabolism glacial, conserving energy to endure centuries in cold, sparse waters. Even the colossal squid relies on ambush, waiting for prey to come close rather than chasing it across the dark. The food web doesn't just feed life, it molds it, carving strategies of patience, efficiency and endurance into every lineage that survives there. And yet, despite scarcity, abundance can appear suddenly. When a whale sinks, when a bloom of marine snow drifts down, when a vent erupts, the abyss comes alive. Scavengers swarm, worms multiply, predators gather. The food web expands in bursts like fireworks in the dark before contracting again into the long wait. It is a rhythm of famine and feast, of silence broken by sudden surges of activity. The creatures of the abyss are tuned to this rhythm, ready to seize opportunity and endure the lean times that follow. The connections are not always obvious. Lanternfish, for example, live in the mid-water zone and migrate upward at night to feed. In doing so, they bring energy from the surface deeper, becoming prey themselves for larger fish, squid and whales. Their daily journey ties the shallow and deep food webs together. Similarly, carcasses that sink link the fates of giants at the surface with scavengers in the deep. Every thread connects, weaving a web that stretches from sunlight to blackness. It is tempting to think of the abyss as empty, but the food web reveals its density. Every particle of marine snow is eaten, re-eaten, recycled. Every carcass is consumed layer by layer. Every chemical seep is exploited by microbes and their partners. Nothing is wasted. The abyss is not barren. It is efficient, a machine of recycling that stretches energy across vast distances and long spans of time. And this efficiency hints at why ancient giants might still survive there. If the food web can support communities around whalefalls for decades, if vents can sustain forests of worms and clams, if a trickle of marine snow can feed amphipods and isopods across entire plains, then it is not unreasonable to imagine that larger, rarer creatures could endure as well. They would not be abundant, but they would not need to be. They would need only to fit into the rhythm of feast and famine, to grow slowly, to conserve energy, to wait. The abyss rewards patience. Giants are patient. The abyssal food web is, in its way, a ghost story too. Every bite is a reminder of something that died above or long ago. Marine snow is the residue of life that once floated in sunlight. Whalefalls are the corpses of titans. Even vent communities are fueled by the slow decay of Earth's minerals. Life here survives on echoes, on the remains of other processes, on what is lost elsewhere. The ghosts of the surface become the sustenance of the deep. In that sense, every creature in the abyss is linked to ghosts, feeding on them, shaped by them, carrying them forward, and in turn, these deep creatures become part of the larger web. Lanternfish feed tuna and swordfish, which feed humans. Whalefalls recycle nutrients that eventually rise again to the surface. Vent bacteria hint at metabolisms that may have sparked the first life on Earth. The abyssal food web isn't isolated, it is part of the planet's whole system, a reminder that even the darkest corners are connected to us in ways we rarely consider. So when you think of the abyss as silent and empty, imagine instead the invisible rain of marine snow, the sudden bounty of a whale fall, the glowing oases of vents, the careful recycling of every fragment. Imagine isopods swarming, sharks circling, worms blooming, lanternfish rising. Imagine giants waiting patiently, enduring famine for the chance of a feast. That is the abyssal food web. Not barren, not broken, but alive, efficient and unrelenting, stretching across darkness to sustain life where it should not exist at all. For most of human history, the abyss was out of reach. People knew the surface, the shorelines, the waves and the storms, but the deep was another world entirely, one they could not see, one they could only imagine. And because they could not go there, the deep came to them. It came in the form of strange creatures washed ashore, in the glimpses of enormous shapes in the water, in the groans of whales carried through wooden hulls at night. It came through encounters at sea that were often brief, startling and unforgettable. For sailors, these moments were both terror and wonder, and the stories they carried back filled myths with images of monsters, serpents and leviathans. Picture a wooden ship in the 17th century, far from land, surrounded by nothing but rolling water and endless sky. The sailors are exhausted, weeks at sea, their provisions running low. And then one night, a shape rises near the hull. It is vast, longer than the boat itself, a body twisting and coiling, eyes reflecting faint moonlight. To the men on board, this is not biology. This is a sea serpent, a dragon of the deep, a monster. They whisper prayers, they grip ropes tighter, they watch as the shape glides past and disappears into the dark. When they return to port, they tell their stories, and those stories spread. Some of the details may have been exaggeration, but the seed was always real, a genuine encounter with something immense from the deep. In hindsight, we can guess at the sources of some of these legends. An oarfish, for instance, with its ribbon-like body stretching up to 11 metres, undulating through the waves like a silver serpent, could easily be mistaken for a sea monster. A giant squid, rarely seen alive at the surface but occasionally washed ashore or tangled in nets, with its enormous tentacles and dinner-plate eyes, could inspire tales of krakens that crushed ships. Even whales, breaching or sounding in the night, their immense backs visible for only seconds, could be transformed in memory into leviathans. But to sailors without modern knowledge, without cameras, these were encounters with the unknown. They were proof that the abyss contained giants, and sometimes the encounters were violent. Whales have rammed ships, mistaking them perhaps for rivals or threats. One of the most famous cases, the sinking of the whale ship Essex in 1820 by a sperm whale, directly inspired the novel Moby Dick. For the men aboard, being attacked by an animal the size of the ship itself was as terrifying as any monster from myth. And if such a giant could strike, what else might be down there, unseen, waiting? For every documented incident, there were countless whispered rumours, feeding into a culture of respect and fear for the deep. The invention of submarines changed the story. For the first time, humans could go down into the depth themselves, not just float on the surface and wonder. Early submarines were crude, small and dangerous, but they allowed glimpses into a world no one had seen before. Sailors in steel tubes reported lights in the blackness, fish with glowing eyes, shapes moving silently beyond the reach of lamps. Some of these reports were dismissed as exaggeration or hallucination under pressure, but others were confirmed later by science. The abyss, once a place of pure imagination, began to reveal itself, and what it revealed was no less strange than myth. During the World Wars, submarines carried men into the deep as weapons of war, but even in battle, encounters with the abyss left impressions. There are stories of sonar operators hearing strange sounds, clicks and moans that didn't match any known submarine. Some of these were later identified as whales or other marine life, but others remain unexplained. The famous bloop sound of the 1990s, though likely the cracking of ice, was initially strong enough to suggest an unknown giant animal. The ocean's acoustic environment is still filled with mystery, and submarines remain our ears in that realm. For modern deep-diving submersibles, the encounters are even more dramatic. Scientists and explorers have filmed colossal squid alive in their natural habitat, their vast forms illuminated suddenly by the lights of a camera. Others have documented siphonophores stretching for tens of meters, glowing chains drifting like living neon ropes in the blackness. Still others have recorded the eerie forests of tube worms at hydrothermal vents, entire alien ecosystems thriving in the dark. For the first time, we can match some of the sailors' tales with reality. And reality, it turns out, is just as fantastic as myth. But encounters remain fleeting. The abyss does not reveal itself easily. For every hour spent in a submersible, there are thousands of hours of waiting, watching nothing but darkness, pressure and silence. Then, suddenly a glow, a movement, a giant drifting past. The effect on those who witness it is profound. Many explorers describe feeling small, humbled, overwhelmed by the scale of what they see. In those moments, the line between science and awe blurs. The abyss is not just studied, it is experienced, and the experience feels like stepping into another world. And even with submarines, the unknown persists. Lights have been recorded that move in ways no known creature should. Shadows have passed beyond the range of cameras too large to identify. Strange, unexplained sounds still echo through hydrophones. These encounters remind us that we have not solved the abyss, not catalogued every giant, not dismissed every myth. The sailors' stories may have been embellished, but their core, that the ocean holds giants we do not fully understand, remains true. The most fascinating part of these encounters is how they connect across time. A 17th century sailor describing a sea serpent, a 19th century whaler attacked by a sperm whale, a 20th century submarine crew startled by unknown sounds, a 21st century scientist filming a colossal squid. All are pieces of the same puzzle. They are human glimpses of a world that exists beyond us, a world that occasionally brushes against ours in sudden, unforgettable ways. The abyss doesn't come to us often, but when it does, it leaves marks in memory, story, and science. And maybe that's the real meaning of encounters with sailors and submarines. They are not the whole truth. They are fragments, glimpses, hints. But together, they form a pattern, a reminder that the deep is never empty, never silent, never lifeless. Giants are there, sometimes rising to meet us, sometimes staying hidden, sometimes only leaving us with a story. And each story, whether told by a sailor on a wooden ship or a scientist in a titanium submersible, is another thread connecting us to the abyss. When we speak of giants in the ocean, it's easy to focus on the ones we know. The blue whale, the largest animal ever to live, the colossal squid with its eyes the size of dinner plates, the lion's mane jellyfish trailing tentacles that stretch longer than football fields. These are impressive enough, and yet they are only the giants we've already discovered. The real mystery lies with the giants we haven't found yet. For every creature documented by science, there are others still hidden, living in places we haven't reached, moving in ways that make them elusive, or existing in numbers so rare that our chances of seeing them are vanishingly small. The ocean is vast beyond comprehension. And in that vastness, there is space for creatures that remain completely unknown to us. Consider the scale. More than 70% of Earth's surface is ocean. The average depth is nearly 4 kilometres, and the deepest trenches go down almost 11. We have explored only a fraction of this space. In fact, some estimates suggest we've mapped and studied less than 5% of the deep ocean in detail. That means 95% remains hidden, unobserved, waiting. In practical terms, that's billions of cubic kilometres of habitat where unknown life could exist undisturbed. If a giant lived in the forests or plains of land, we would likely know. If it lived in the skies, we would see it. But in the abyss, a giant could live and die without ever once crossing paths with humans. And we have clues that they do. Time and again, pieces of evidence surface that suggest something larger than what we know. Strange scars on sperm whales, circular marks wider than the tentacles of any squid we've documented, hint at battles with creatures even larger than the colossal squid. Deep-sea nets sometimes bring up fragments of tissue, beaks, or parts of tentacles that seem outsized compared to known specimens. Unexplained sonar contacts register shapes of massive size moving at depths where no submarine or whale should be. Even in modern times, with all our technology, there are still moments when the ocean gives us hints and then falls silent again. One of the most compelling examples is sound. Hydrophones placed in the deep record strange calls, groans and pulses that do not match any known species. Some, like the famous bloop recorded in 1997, were so loud they could be heard across thousands of kilometres. The explanation eventually leaned toward the cracking of ice, but the fact remains. The ocean produces noises that seem biological, vast, and beyond our understanding. Other mysterious calls like the Julia or the upsweep remain unexplained. If whales sing across oceans, who is to say other giants do not also communicate in ways we have not yet identified? Even the giants we thought we knew sometimes surprise us. The colossal squid was long considered a myth, a story from sailors about monstrous tentacled creatures. It wasn't until the 2000s that we finally saw one alive, filmed in its natural habitat. Until then, our knowledge came only from carcasses washed up on beaches or pieces pulled from the stomachs of whales. How many other giants are still waiting in that same limbo, known only by fragments, hinted at in scars, present in whispers, but not yet seen alive? If we could be so ignorant of a creature as large as the colossal squid until recently, what else might we still be missing? The abyss encourages gigantism. We know this from the isopods, the amphipods, the worms, the jellyfish. Again and again, species grow larger in the deep than they do at the surface. The pattern is consistent, which means it is not unreasonable to think that somewhere below there are giants that push this rule even further. Fish larger than any we've documented, squids longer than any we've measured, jellyfish broader than any we've filmed. Perhaps not in vast numbers, but in enough numbers to persist, to reproduce, to endure. The abyss doesn't need abundance to support giants. It needs only patience. And patience is what the deep has in endless supply. Human encounters give us stories that keep the possibility alive. Sailors across centuries described serpents longer than ships, monstrous crabs, glowing creatures with bodies like dragons. While exaggeration is inevitable, it's hard to ignore the consistency of these stories across cultures and time. Something was seen again and again, something so large, so different, that people could not explain it except as a monster. Today, we reinterpret those stories through biology. Maybe an oarfish here, a squid there, a whale mistaken for something stranger. But even with that reinterpretation, the possibility lingers. What if some of the stories were closer to truth than we think? Technology has advanced, but even with cameras, sonar and submersibles, we're still blind most of the time. The ocean is too vast, the giants too rare, the encounters too brief. Most submersibles can stay down for hours, at most days, while the creatures we seek live lifespans of decades or centuries. Most cameras can only film narrow windows, while the ocean stretches endlessly. Our nets sample only tiny portions of water, and most giants could easily avoid them. The giants we haven't found yet are not necessarily hidden because they are mythical. They are hidden because the ocean is simply too big and we are too small. And the most intriguing part is that we may already have brushed against them without realizing it. A sonar blip dismissed as noise, a shadow on a camera frame ignored as debris, a carcass washed up too decomposed to identify. Every fragment may have been a clue, every missed observation another chance lost. The giants may not be waiting to be discovered. They may have been brushing past us all along, just beyond the edge of our perception. The question then is not whether the giants exist, but when we will finally find them. As technology improves, as submersibles go deeper, as drones and robots spread farther into trenches, our odds increase. Already we've discovered entire ecosystems around vents we once thought barren. Already we've filmed squids we thought were myths. Already we've found worms meters long, crabs of impossible size, and jellyfish trailing for kilometers. Each discovery brings us closer to the truth. The abyss is not finished surprising us. And if we do find new giants, they will not just be curiosities. They will change how we think about life itself. Each giant forces us to expand our imagination, to accept that our planet holds secrets too vast to dismiss. They remind us that the age of discovery is not over, that there are still frontiers untouched, mysteries unsolved, monsters waiting. And they remind us most of all that humility is essential. The giants we haven't found yet are not just animals, they are symbols of how much bigger the world is than we are, how much deeper, how much stranger. So when you look out at the ocean, endless and silent, remember that silence is deceptive. Beneath it are forms so vast they may dwarf us, eyes so large they shine like moons, bodies so long they stretch beyond imagination. We have not seen them yet, but they are there, waiting still in the dark. When we think of the abyss, it's tempting to picture it as separate from us, a distant world sealed away by pressure, darkness and depth. But the truth is, it has always been with us. The creatures of the deep are not strangers. They are companions, sharing the planet with us every moment, even if we rarely see them. They have been here long before us, and they will likely remain long after. In that sense, they are eternal companions of the deep, a lineage of beings that endure quietly, endlessly, shaping the ocean's hidden heart. Consider time. Human history is a blink compared to the lifespans of these lineages. Sharks were swimming in the oceans hundreds of millions of years before the first forests grew on land. Nautiluses were building their chambered shells before the first dinosaur walked the earth. Jellyfish pulsed through the water before eyes evolved to see them. These creatures are not recent inventions. They are the survivors of ages, the holdouts from eras when the world was unrecognizable to us. They have endured asteroid impacts, ice ages, and mass extinctions. While countless species rose and fell, they remained. To share the planet with them is to live alongside immortals, companions of time itself, and some individuals themselves live astonishingly long. The Greenland shark, slow-moving in Arctic waters, can live for more than 4 centuries. A clam pulled from the North Atlantic was found to be over 500 years old. Even the tube worms at cold seeps can live for centuries, rooted in the same place while civilizations rise and fall above them. These lifespans defy our imagination, stretching the meaning of what it is to be alive. When we look at them, we're not just seeing an animal, we're seeing continuity, the long thread of existence woven across centuries. They are companions not only of the deep, but of history itself. Eternal companions are not always individuals or species. Sometimes they are entire patterns, entire strategies of survival that the deep has nurtured again and again. Gigantism, bioluminescence, patience, endurance. These traits appear across lineages, repeated endlessly, as if the abyss whispers the same instructions to every creature that settles there. Grow large, shine in the dark, move slowly, conserve energy, last. These are the rules of the deep, and every species that survives there carries them forward. The result is a community of eternal companions, each different in form but united in principle, bound by the same invisible laws of survival. And though they are eternal, they are not silent. The songs of whales echo for thousands of miles, carrying across oceans like voices in the dark. The flashes of bioluminescence ripple through the water, like messages written in light. The scars on whale flesh tell of battles with squid we have barely glimpsed. The skeletons of ancient falls are colonized by worms that feed for decades. Every sound, every glow, every scar, every echo is a reminder that these companions are not just shadows. They are present, active, living alongside us in ways we rarely recognize. It is humbling to think of the scale. For us, life is fast, compressed, fragile. We measure years and decades and think them long. For the abyss, centuries are nothing. Species that have remained unchanged for millions of years look up at us, if they look at all, as temporary, brief, like sparks in their endless night. In this way, they are eternal not only because they live long, but because they remind us of endurance beyond ourselves. They show us that survival is not always about speed, growth, or dominance. Sometimes it is about patience, about quiet persistence, about adapting to pressure until pressure itself becomes home. And this companionship is not metaphor alone. These creatures sustain the planet we live on. The ocean absorbs carbon, regulates climate, provides oxygen. The food webs of the deep recycle nutrients, ensuring the cycles of life continue. The whales, by diving and feeding, pump nutrients from the deep back to the surface. The plankton that die and sink feed the abyss, connecting the surface world to the bottom. Every breath we take is influenced by these hidden systems. Our eternal companions are not just curiosities. They are caretakers of the earth itself, guardians of cycles that allow us to live. There is also a sense of mystery in this companionship. We do not know them fully. Even now, after centuries of sailing and decades of exploration, the deep keeps its secrets. We discover new species every year, some small, some large, some so strange they seem unreal. Each discovery is a reminder that our companions are not all known. Some are waiting still, living alongside us yet unseen. To call them eternal companions is to admit that the relationship is unfinished, that we are still learning who they are, still adding new faces to the community of the deep. For sailors, these companions were terrifying, glimpsed in flashes of moonlight or in stories of monsters. For scientists, they are fascinating, observed in the glow of submersibles and the recordings of hydrophones. For us, listening now, they are both terrifying in their strangeness, fascinating in their endurance. They remind us of our place, small and temporary, beside a lineage that stretches back to the dawn of time. They are eternal because they have already survived everything the earth has thrown at them. They will endure after us, continuing their slow lives in the blackness long after our stories fade. And so, when we wonder what ancient giants still lurk in the abyss, perhaps the answer is not only in the ones we haven't yet discovered. Perhaps the answer is also in the ones already here, already living alongside us, companions whose presence is so steady we forget how extraordinary it is. The sharks, the squids, the jellyfish, the worms, the isopods, the whales, all of them, eternal companions of the deep. We don't need to invent monsters to feel awe. The reality is already enough. The ocean is filled with beings that embody survival, endurance, and mystery in ways beyond anything we could dream. And they are not only companions of the deep, they are companions of us. Every time a whale song carries across an ocean, it is speaking into the same world we inhabit. Every time bioluminescence glows, it is part of the same planet's light. Every time a shark circles in the dark, it is living in the same time we are. The abyss may be far, but it is not separate. We live together, sharing the earth, sharing its past, present and future. They are eternal not because they are immortal, but because they remind us that life, in its persistence, is eternal. And so, the giants of the abyss, the ghosts of prehistoric seas, the lights in the blackness, the companions older than trees, are not strangers or monsters. They are neighbours we rarely see, fellow travellers on the same planet, companions in the truest sense. They are eternal because they endure, eternal because they belong, eternal because they will always be part of the story of life on Earth, whether we witness them or not.